Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Ethan? What's wrong? You look like you've lost your best friend. Come on, it's a Christmas party. I flinched, startled, and looked up to find myself face to face with Allison, my best friend's wife, leaning toward me with a look of genuine concern, and a view that could have been distracting under other circumstances. "Oh, hi, Allison," I said, managing a weak smile. "Sorry, I guess I'm just not in much of a party mood tonight. Got a lot on my mind." Even as I said it, the weight of what I was planning, and how much it would hurt her, pressed heavier on me. Allison pulled out a chair and sat down beside me, her expression soft but insistent. "Come on, brighten up a little," she said, reaching out to touch my hand lightly. "Tell Aunt Allison what's bothering you." "It's nothing really," I replied, shaking my head. "Just mulling over some things I need to handle next week. Not exactly looking forward to it." "Come on, dance with me," Allison urged, her smile coaxing. "Look at Ryan and Stephanie. They're having the time of their lives out there. Why don't we give it a try? Who knows? Maybe we'll get just as many envious stares as they are." Her eyes sparkled mischievously as she leaned in closer. "Then, once I've worn you out on the dance floor, you can buy me a drink, and we can talk. There's something I need to ask you." I hesitated for a moment, but eventually, her persistence won me over. She led me onto the dance floor, and as soon as we started moving, she melted into my arms with an easy familiarity. It felt almost nostalgic, like we were back in high school, swaying together at one of those carefree sock hops. But I couldn't fully focus on Allison, no matter how natural it felt. My eyes kept darting toward Ryan and Stephanie, watching them laugh and twirl in each other's arms. Every step we took together reminded me of the painful truths I had uncovered and the intricate plans I had laid to deal with them. As we moved to the music, my mind raced with the bitterness of betrayal and the cold determination to set things right on my terms. When we married, Stephanie and I were deeply in love, and lust just like most couples. Unlike most, it had continued for years, and until our last 4th of July party, I had assumed it would continue until one of us died. Well, at least the children were through college and settled in good careers. What was about to happen would hurt them, but since they were adults, they could better handle it. Like most men who discover their wives were cheating, I never saw it coming. I wondered if I would still be happily ignorant of the problem if I hadn't overheard my sister-in-law and one of her and Stephanie's friends gossip at the Independence Day party. We had the party at our home on our small acreage because we had a small stream running close to the house. There was a nice swimming hole about 150 feet from the house. I kept the yard mowed up to it and had built a shelter and barbecue grill beside it. Many happy days were spent there until the day. Almost all our friends and many of the neighbors were in attendance. We had way more guests than I had anticipated, so I had gone back to the house for supplies. I was standing in the pantry when I overheard the two women talking outside the hallway bathroom. I still get almost sick at my stomach thinking about what I heard that day and what I had seen later. Sharon, Stephanie's sister, laughed and told Paulo no. "Ethan is so dumb he never suspects a thing. Steph can tell him anything and he believes her. We have an agreement that I am with her, or she is with me if either of our men asks." She laughed again and continued, "Of course, most of the time we're with one of our friends, not each other. What our doofuses don't know won't hurt them now, will it? Just look at how much time Steph spends with Ryan at these parties, and neither of them even suspects a thing. They dance and play around and Ethan and Allison just ignore it. Steph says Ryan is so much better than Leo was. She really dreads having to move on when Ethan or Allison start getting suspicious and she has to quit seeing Ryan." I still remember the shock of overhearing that conversation. I spent the rest of the evening watching Stephanie and Ryan. I was trying to convince myself that what they were doing was innocent. I began adding things up in my mind, seeing their actions in a different light. I mean, Ryan and I had been best friends since before beginning grade school. He and I, Allison and Stephanie, grew up together. Surely, he wouldn't screw me this way. Then I had the irreverent thought. He wasn't screwing me, just my wife. He was just shafting me, his best friend. Sure, we had grown apart a little while I was away from our small town in the military. I had spent 26 years in the Army before retiring and moving back home 2 years ago. Ryan, on the other hand, had gone away to college and then returned home to open his own business. He was now a very big duck in our small 5,000-plus population puddle of a town. Well, that was soon to change. I had called in some favors from some of my military friends. I also put to use some of the skills I had thought I would never use after retiring. We were getting a little surprise ready for my loving wife Stephanie and her friend Ryan. Like most men in this situation, after I had accepted the hurt and gotten partially over the sickness of the betrayal, I began planning for the end. Like a lot of men, I didn't immediately confront the perpetrators of this adultery. I gathered evidence, planned my attack, and prepared for as many foreseeable outcomes and counterattacks as I could. I had enlisted the aid of one of my retired military friends, now a powerful attorney in a town not far from where we lived early on. I carefully followed all his legal advice as I began planning my moves against Ryan and Steph. Of course, he was the divorce attorney too, and we planned well for that also. While I was remembering what started my slide into this dismaying mental state, I quit paying so much attention to my dance partner. I was glaring so hard at Steph and Ryan I stumbled. Allison looked up into my face, and I saw her start. She then followed my gaze, and a troubled look came over her face. "Ethan?" She stopped dancing and took my hand, looking into my face. "Oh my God. You know, don't you? How long have you known?" she asked as she led me toward the door to the balcony. I followed her in a trance, and as we neared the edge of the balcony, she turned to me. I could see the tears in her eyes. "I have suspected for some time, but I only got the proof on them last week," Allison said. "What about you? When did you find out, and why didn't you tell me?" "I was going to tell you what I knew tonight." "What are you going to do now?" I felt my chest tighten, and I had trouble speaking. Allison, I am so sorry," I said. I am going to ruin him and dump that woman just as soon as I finish planning my attack. I have been waiting, trying to set things up so you didn't get hurt too badly by collateral damage. I just wasn't sure how to proceed without hurting you too much." Allison's hand came out to caress my face. "Oh, Ethan, honey, just do what you have to do. I know you wouldn't hurt me for the world. I've known since grade school. I just wish." She stopped and ran back into the hotel crying. I stood there with my mouth hanging open, then almost doubled up as a pain tore through my gut. I had remembered the scene I witnessed the 4th of July after I pretended to get so drunk I had to go to bed early. I was leaning over the railing throwing up when Stephanie came looking for me. She thought I was drunk and began giving me hell for embarrassing her in front of our friends. I looked at her in disgust and went around the side of the hotel, hearing her voice fading into the distance. I walked around a few minutes and then went in the front door. I found our hostess and told her I was ill and had to go home. I asked if she could see Stephanie got home. I was pretty sure Ryan would bring her home when he was finished with her, but it never hurts to be positive. Oh, wait. I think Allison left and took his car when she left. Oh, shucks. I stepped out under the hotel portico and let my mind once again remember some of the painful things my friends and I had discovered over the last 6 months. I stood there thinking about the videos some friends had obtained from surreptitiously placed spy cameras. I also remembered some pictures I had taken on the day I discovered Stephanie's infidelity. I had given Stephanie every chance to prove me wrong, and what did she do? As soon as she could get alone with Ryan after she was sure I had safely passed out from drink that July 4th, she had let him screw her. She could hardly get up and walk after their session. I could hear them in the guest room that day. As soon as they were well into their cheating, I had slowly cracked open the door. My wonderful Steph was flat on her back with my ex-buddy was having sex with her. After he was done, he leaned forward and tenderly kissed her. It was all I could do not to rush into the room and tear him apart. The main reason I didn't was because I wanted an even more painful revenge. I just finished taking the pictures, then slowly and softly closed the door and returned to bed. After pretending to sleep for a few minutes that day, I had staggered back to the party and looked up my wife and Ryan. I moved between them and hugged Steph. "Hey baby, I love you. Why don't we go somewhere for a few minutes and have some fun?" I was laughing inside as I watched Stephanie blush and get her furious look. "Ethan, you've had way too much scotch tonight. Now just behave yourself and maybe you'll get lucky tomorrow." "Well, gee Steph, you look like you could really use some good sex. I just didn't want you to have to settle for Ryan, so I thought I would make the offer." After I said that, Stephanie blanched and then said, "Oh you." She turned and walked away. Needless to say, even if I had wanted to touch her, I wouldn't have gotten to that night. July 5th, I began planning and contacting my friends. We had a steady stream of visitors during the summer, and each of them made a contribution in time and expertise. Some of them also made investments in a new company I had formed. One of the first things my friends and I began doing was buying shares of Ryan's computer consulting company. It was a closely held entity, and I had known for several years that some of the initial investors wanted to get rid of their shares. It seems Ryan had figured out how to make the profits disappear into his bank account. He paid himself and some of his friends he had on the payroll exorbitant salaries. My friends and I had signed a contract. Now, I know this wasn't completely legal, where they would each purchase enough shares to stay just under the legal reporting rules for majority ownership in a publicly traded company. The transactions were reported, but since Ryan didn't recognize their names, he just assumed nothing was amiss. My friends dutifully gave Ryan a proxy to vote at the annual meeting when he requested it. Of course, they then executed another proxy after that date and gave it to me. The end result was that by year's end, we owned or had proxies for almost 73% of Ryan's company. Just before the end of the year, they all placed their shares in the small holding company I had formed and took company stock in return. The only shares I didn't own or control the voting right to were those Ryan, Allison, or his children owned. Ryan's annual meeting of shareholders was January 10th, and that would be his last day of employment and his last day of being respected in our town. My mind was dragged back to the present when I saw Allison enter the hotel lobby from the direction of the restrooms. Something twisted inside of me. At first I felt so damn sad. Then I knew I had to talk to her again. I re-entered the hotel and followed her through the lobby, down the hallway beside the conference rooms and out the side door. I watched her run toward the parking lot. Without thinking, I ran to follow her. By the time I reached the parking lot, her car was leaving. I quickly entered my car and went in pursuit. Thankfully, in a small town, there isn't much traffic late in the evening, and I could keep her in sight. She was going to her home as I halfway expected her to do, so I slowed down and followed at a more sedate pace. I followed Allison into her house and stood watching when she collapsed onto the bed, sobbing her heart out. I had always had a soft spot for my dear Allison. She might have been my wife if Ryan hadn't talked her into marrying him while I was off taking basic training so many years ago. We had been grade school friends and even dated some in high school. She had dated Ryan also, and after I had left became serious about him. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently gathered her into my arms. She looked up at me, wrapped her arms around me, and sobbed into my chest. I just held Allison, gently stroking her, giving what comfort I could as she finally cried herself out. I felt her push herself away from me and she said, "Oh, God. I'm so sorry, Ethan. You're hurting so, and all I can do is force my sorrow onto you. Oh, what are we going to do?" I stood and reached out for her hand, pulling her up from the bed. "Well, first, you're going to make us a pot of coffee. Then while we drink it, I suppose I had better fill you in on the attack that is going to take place in a few days." "What?" "Oh, Ethan, don't do anything like that. You just think you know Ryan. He'll have you in jail. He has so many of the movers and shakers here in his pocket, he will ruin you if you attack him." "I couldn't stand to have anything happen to you," Allison said. "No, Allison, I don't mean a physical attack. As much as I would love to do that, my friends and I had considered and discarded that option in August. In fact, I believe my attack will be much more painful and devastating to my friend Ryan than any physical pain I could inflict." "August? My God, you've known since August? How did you keep everything so normal for that long? And why didn't you tell me?" "Damn you, I had only suspected since Thanksgiving. Allison, I had to plan my revenge, gather evidence, and I was also trying to figure out a way to protect you. Part of what was bothering me tonight was you and how to break the news to you. You may have copies of all the evidence I have obtained if you want it, but I am afraid things are going to be uncomfortable after the first of the year. I am going to give my children as normal a Christmas as I can, then I will file the papers after the first of the year. Please don't do anything until the first of the year. I would really like for us to coordinate our actions if you know what you plan to do." "Do? My God, you have to ask? I'm going to divorce the scumsucker and take him for everything I can. Then, after the hurt is over, I guess I am going to try and get on with what is left of my life." Allison and I sat for about an hour discussing our problem. I filled her in on the evidence I had and how I planned to take care of Ryan and Stephanie. She agreed with most of my plans and even made some useful suggestions. I finally decided I should leave before Ryan and Stephanie left the party and he caught us together. I suggested that since we had the cars, Allison should return to the party and pretend she had been there all the time. This would allow her and Ryan to bring Stephanie home as if nothing had happened. As I was leaving through the side door, Allison pulled me to her and gave me a gentle kiss. She cupped my face in her hand and gave me a brave little smile. "Good night, Ethan," she said in a whisper. I never knew when my darling wife returned to our home. I woke up at almost my normal time to find her lying beside me, obviously still intoxicated. My anger seethed within me again, and I rushed from the room, taking my everyday clothing with me to dress in the kitchen while the coffee perked. A month. One more month, and I could begin to repay my wife and friend for the pain they had caused Allison and me. I could hardly restrain myself. I wanted to punish them so badly. Finally, the fateful day arrived, the day of the annual meeting of the shareholders in Ryan's company. We had made arrangements for everyone who had held shares previously to give a proxy to Ryan authorizing him to vote them. We then executed new proxies with a later date authorizing me to vote the shares at the annual meeting. We made sure the new proxies were all dated after the sale date for the shares and before the record date for the meeting. This made the original owner's proxies invalid because they were before the cutoff date for stock ownership and voting authorization. This, of course, meant I could vote all the shares. My friends and I had gathered in the hotel where the meeting was going on. We had agreed I would become president and chief operating officer as well as chairman of the new board of directors. Ryan had not staggered the board terms, so all were elected at each annual meeting. My new board was composed of friends that had purchased stock. Also present was my personal attorney and the county sheriff. The sheriff was to serve divorce papers on Ryan for Allison, as well as to be there if he became violent. We were listening outside the door to the meeting room. When Ryan made the purely formal request for new business, he had not expected any. We opened the doors and filed into the room. "Ethan," Ryan said as I entered with my entourage. "What are you doing?" "We are having a meeting here." "Sorry I'm late, Ryan. I guess I got here just in time." "I heard you calling for new business, didn't I?" Ryan got a strange look on his face, then said, "Well, yes, but this is a stockholder meeting for my company." "I don't think you own stock now, do you?" "Oh, sorry, Ryan. I guess your records might not be too accurate. I personally own approximately 10% of 4 states computer consultants. I also own 51% of Southwest Missouri Holdings, and this corporation owns 64% of 4 states. I'm afraid that means I directly control approximately 73% of 4 states. Now, the new business I want to bring before this board is—" "Whoa, what did you say?" Ryan asked. "No, that's not possible. I have a list here of all owners, and I have their proxies for this meeting. Now, what do you think you were trying to pull here?" As Ryan said that, he sorted through his files, then looked up and grinned as an assistant handed him a book titled Current Shareholders. After he opened the book and started reading the page, his face turned white, then red in anger. "What the hell? I don't know how you managed this, but it is bullshit. What do you think you were pulling here?" I walked to the podium then and picked up the microphone. One of my prospective employees and/or directors was standing beside each of Ryan's by this time. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman with me and I have held an election, one that is completely in accordance with the bylaws of this company. We have elected a new board of directors. This board has appointed me president of the company, chief operating officer, and chairman of the new board. It is now my duty to inform you that all old board members are dismissed, that you, Ryan, are fired. As you exit this room, there are security personnel outside who will escort you to your former offices to remove your personal possessions. You will all, if employees of this company, receive any severance pay authorized for your position. As for you, Ryan, since no amount is specified, none will be offered." Ryan looked at me and said, "You son of a bitch. I thought you were my friend. I've got a notion to beat the crap out of you." He clenched his fist and started to swing. My attorney, the sheriff, and I both began our respective responses. The sheriff said, "Sir, if you attack this gentleman, I will have to arrest you for assault." I said, "You a-hole. Just try it. I would love to let you get in the first punch, so I can use all that army training and beat the shit out of you." My attorney said, "Mr. Adams, please do. I would love to add a lawsuit of assault to the ones we currently have pending against you." Ryan stood there a moment looking shocked, then turned to the attorney. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? What lawsuits?" "The one to regain some of the corporate funds we believe you used improperly. The one we have filed on behalf of Mr. Mahoney alleging alienation of affection of his wife Stephanie and—" "What the hell?" yelled Ryan. "What the hell do you mean alienation of affection and misuse?" With that, the sheriff stepped forward and handed Ryan a paper that he took automatically. "You have been served," he said. "This is divorce papers from your wife Allison alleging infidelity, a restraining order, and order for you to vacate her home. Also included is the paperwork involving the alienation of affection suit filed by Mr. Mahoney, in which he alleges you systematically worked to alienate his wife from him and citing dates and times you were with her sexually." At this, the murmur building in the background rose to a roar. We turned to see all doors to the meeting room standing wide open and the hallway filled with observers and reporters. I don't know how, but the local paper had been notified of the pending events, and somehow a rumor had started in town that morning that this meeting would be a real event. I got even more pleasure knowing that at this very moment my cheating bitch of a wife was also being served divorce papers. As I was thinking this, my cell phone rang. Sure enough, it was Stephanie. I smiled and answered, "Hello, Steph." "Hey, I'm really busy right now. Can this wait?" "You scumsucker," she screamed. "What is the meaning of this? Divorce? You accuse me of infidelity?" I ought. I broke into her conversation and said, Steph, shut up. Go in and watch the DVD in the player, then pack and get out of my house. I'm busy dealing with your friend Ryan right now. I then hung up and turned off my phone. Well, did the paper have a field day? In fact, the story got picked up by national media and was splashed on many business pages nationwide because our company had dealings all over the country. I got many calls from people I had been in the army with, and some of them even told me they had suspected Stephanie was screwing around on me while I was off on duty. I talked to Stephanie one time after the divorce was filed. Like most cheating spouses, she was positive she could use spin control and make me cancel the divorce. We were at the attorney's office, and she made the offer I couldn't refuse. Stephanie said, Ethan, could we please talk about this mess one time? Honey, I know your feelings were hurt, but Ryan just didn't mean anything to me. It was always you I loved. I've loved you from the first time I met you in grade school. Just give me a few minutes, and I will sign the papers if you still want me to. I looked at the two attorneys standing beside us, then at Stephanie. Okay, I said, but I want the attorneys to hear all this, and I want a tape made of the discussion. If you agree to that, I'll listen to you one time. Oh, Ethan, we don't need attorneys for a little talk between us, do we? After all, we used to talk all the time. What's the difference? You know damn well what the difference is, Steph. You might say something or allege I said something that could cause a lot of problems in the divorce. I don't want that, so I want a tape and the attorneys. Take it or leave it. Well, she agreed, and we had our little talk. After we were all seated in the conference room, Stephanie started. Ethan, you're blowing this all out of proportion. I admit I cheated and I am truly sorry, but is that any reason to throw away 25 years of happy married life? Didn't you ever do something while we were separated that you were ashamed of? Ryan kept hitting on me until I succumbed to him. I'm not proud of that, but come on. Is one time in our marriage enough to just throw me to the curb? I looked at her in shock, then replied, No, Steph. If it had been just one time, I might have been able to forgive you, but it wasn't, was it? I have proof of several months of infidelity with Ryan alone. Lord knows how many others there were over the years. How about Leo? Do you care to tell me his last name so I can visit with him about you? Or how about all the men you were with while I was away from home? I had several friends come forward when they found out I had finally caught you and tell me they had known or suspected you cheated while I was away. What about them? Stephanie was shocked at my outburst, then her face got red. She began shouting at me. You a-hole. How dare you? When we were younger, you would just take off and do your duty to your country with no concern for me. You would leave me at home alone to care for the kids and run the house. I had needs too. I needed to be talked to and told how desirable I was. I needed some adult company. I admit I had some male friends while you were gone, but so what? Nothing I did while you were gone cost you a thing. It wasn't like you were pleasing me in bed. Oh, hell no. You had your duty. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't have some damn bar girl too, but I could never find anyone that would admit it to me. All your damn men were too loyal to rat you out. Only twice in our marriage did I take any man into my bed while you were home, and then it didn't cost you anything. I always gave you sex when you wanted it. I never said no, even if I had been with Leo or Ryan. How can you say I wasn't a good wife? I played the good military wife and attended all your parties. I simpered too and agreed with all the wives of your superior officers, even if they were simpering bitches. I supported your career, and now you're just going to dump me because I have a few friends you don't approve of? Well, you can just go to hell. After Stephanie said that, she grabbed the divorce papers, signed them, and thrust them toward the two speechless attorneys. Stephanie looked at all of us, then said, You can just rot in hell. I'm out of here. She stomped from the room and was out of sight before any of us could even speak. A couple of weeks later, Stephanie rented a U-Haul truck and loaded her belongings. The boys say she has moved to a small retirement community in Florida. I haven't seen or talked to her since that day. I fared pretty well in the property settlement. Stephanie was so angry at the meeting she didn't pay much attention to the settlement proposal, and I guess the attorney either wasn't too good or was so shocked at her outburst he didn't bring up how one-sided in my favor it was. Part of the reason for the long time between discovery of her cheating and the filing of the divorce was so I could move and hide assets, but truthfully, I couldn't do much of that. Thankfully, after we retired, Stephanie had not paid too much attention to our finances, so it was easy to make the few changes I had made. She did get half of my pension and half of the brokerage account, but I kept all the property and managed to keep my ownership of Ryan's company too. All in all, I kept over 80% of our assets. Even with the amount I kept in the divorce, Stephanie was able to live a comfortable life, but it was to be a lonesome one. It seemed like her reputation followed her, and whenever she got serious about another man, he found out about her past indiscretions. I am so sorry about that, but, well, heck, wouldn't you want to know everything also? As for the company, My friends and I orchestrated a buyout, taking it private to overhaul the business. With strategic improvements, we eventually took it public again, reaping a massive profit when the stock soared. We brought in top-tier professional management and secured a listing on the NYSE. After that, I stepped down and began a new chapter of my life with my wife. She, by the way, walked away with nearly all of Ryan's company stock in the divorce and became quite wealthy after the public offering. As for Ryan, life hasn't been as kind. Things got so uncomfortable for him here that he eventually packed up and moved about 100 miles away. Now, he manages a small grocery store and rents a one-bedroom apartment in a low-income housing complex. Revenge, it turns out, can be both satisfying and profitable, especially when it involves outsmarting a cheating spouse. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
From an early age, I found solace in long, open roads. As a teenager, I worked in my uncle's repair shop, learning the intricacies of engines and the satisfaction of fixing something broken. After high school, I earned my commercial driver's license, drawn to the independence trucking offered. For years, I crisscrossed the country, making connections with small-town folks and big-city strangers alike. One summer, while delivering hay bales to a remote farm in Nebraska, I encountered a family struggling with a failing well. Without hesitation, I offered my help, spending hours rigging a temporary solution until professional repairs could be made. That experience stuck with me, reminding me how small gestures could profoundly affect others. My marriage to Marcy was a whirlwind. We met at a diner during a layover, and her quick wit and charming laugh captivated me. Within 6 months, we exchanged vows, with dreams of a shared life built on trust and mutual goals. Yet, as time passed, cracks began to form, subtle but undeniable. On one particularly grueling route, I rescued a fellow trucker whose rig had flipped during a storm. While waiting for help, we shared stories over soggy sandwiches, and he confided in me about his failing marriage. His words echoed in my mind for weeks, making me question whether my own relationship with Marcy was as solid as I'd believed. My daughters, Linda and Lauren, became my anchor. Even when work kept me on the road for days or weeks, their nightly calls reminded me of my purpose. I dreamed of building a life where I could be more present, but the financial demands of our growing family kept me behind the wheel. One fortuitous trip through Texas changed everything. While delivering medical supplies, I stumbled upon a small farming community desperate to save their land from foreclosure. My involvement started with a single phone call and blossomed into a partnership that led to the founding of a village. That decision set the stage for both triumphs and heartbreaks that would define the next chapter of my life. Half a decade ago, an unplanned turn of events led me to create what is now a thriving settlement named Circumstances. Today, it's a home for 349 individuals, a community that emerged from an unexpected opportunity. It all began rather abruptly. After completing a delivery of specialty bandages in Texas, I was assigned a new route that promised an early return home. With my credentials for handling sensitive materials, I was among the few eligible for the task. The pickup was conveniently close, and the drop-off point was just an hour from home. Taking an alternate route cut my travel time significantly, leaving me hours ahead of schedule and opening a door I never anticipated. On my way back, I stopped at an intersection and noticed a hand-painted sign advertising land for sale, property that was about to be seized for unpaid taxes. Following the signs led me to a farmhouse where an elderly couple was struggling to keep up with rising property taxes. They were selling a portion of their land to hold onto their farm. After calling my dad, we decided to purchase the farm through our family trust at fair market value. This arrangement allowed the couple to stay in their home as long-term renters at an affordable rate. They were deeply appreciative and offered to help us in any way they could. We sectioned off 10 acres at the crossroads to build a gas station and convenience store, a smart investment since the nearest town was an hour away. I also suggested my dad acquire additional parcels of land surrounding the intersection. He successfully purchased 10 acres at each corner. While surveying the property, we discovered an underground river capable of supplying water to tens of thousands of people, making it ideal for future commercial development. By the time I finished my delivery and took another rush job, I still made it home on time. 6 months later, after a grueling 16-day haul, which included a breakdown, I finally completed my delivery early on a Wednesday morning, 12 hours ahead of schedule, and parked at the company yard. I picked up the keys to my freshly restored Ford truck, which had just undergone a complete overhaul during my time off. I had restored its body and frame, paid a local shop to repaint it, and had a new engine installed by Jameson's Auto. Once a weathered red, the truck now gleamed in midnight black with chrome accents and a freshly painted tailgate featuring the iconic Ford logo. It looked showroom new, even qualifying for collector plates. That evening, I arrived home in time for dinner, ready to savor a quiet night with my wife, Marcy, and our 2 daughters. After 16 days on the road, I was thrilled to be back early, eager to surprise Marcy before her workday began at 9 a.m. But as I approached our street at 8 a.m., my excitement turned to confusion. Parked in our driveway was a truck that didn't belong there. Jack Reddings, the son of my boss and my co-driver. Jack was notorious for being loudmouthed and a bit of a troublemaker. I parked discreetly down the street and watched. My heart sank as Marcy and Jack exited the house together with my daughters. Jack was carrying a trucker's rig bag, and it was clear they were dropping the girls off at school after missing the bus. Before loading the kids into the car, Marcy and Jack shared an embrace that was far too intimate for mere acquaintances. The scene left no doubt. This wasn't a new development. I filmed the interaction on my phone. They didn't notice me as they drove off. My truck was unrecognizable in its new look. Once they were gone, I pulled into the driveway to investigate. The house initially seemed normal. My daughter's rooms were untouched, as was the master bedroom. Everything was in its place, down to the neatly made bed, which felt odd given the rushed morning. Still, something compelled me to dig deeper. I searched every corner, from the basement to the main floor, but found nothing unusual, until I noticed a faint glow coming from under the door to the unfinished 3rd floor. Curiosity got the better of me. That space was typically dark and unused, so the light was unexpected. I climbed the stairs and opened the door, stunned to discover the area fully renovated. Sunlight streamed through open curtains, illuminating a luxurious master suite with a king-sized bed, walk-in closets, a sitting area with a TV, and an ensuite bathroom. None of these changes had ever been discussed with me. On a small table, I found adult DVDs, something Marcy had always condemned. When I turned on the TV and played one of the discs, my stomach churned. The video featured Marcy performing a sexual act she had always refused to do with me. Watching her enthusiasm was devastating. The woman I thought I knew had embraced something she once called disgusting. On a coffee table across the room was a handmade card that read, "We love you, Uncle Jack," signed by my kids. I felt sick. The signs were undeniable. Jack wasn't just Marcy's lover. They were working to make him part of my children's lives. The disheveled bed, discarded lingerie I'd never seen before, and the unmistakable smell of recent closeness painted a grim picture. The walk-in closet told a similar story. One side held Jack's oversized clothes, while the other was filled with Marcy's, including provocative outfits she had never worn for me. The betrayal was glaringly obvious. I recorded everything in the room, making sure to document the oversized shirts, the DVDs, and even a framed photo of Jack with his parents. Standing in front of a mirror, I held up one of Jack's shirts to emphasize how it couldn't possibly belong to me. Finally, I rewound the disc and filmed its contents. Marcy and Jack, intimately involved, with Jack clearly visible. When I finished, I saved all the footage. The evidence was damning. There was no turning back from this revelation. I went down to the basement, grabbed my suitcase, and began throwing in my clothes. Before I left, I returned upstairs to the 3rd floor and took the disc containing the explicit video, slipping it into my luggage. Once everything was packed, I left the bags by the front door and moved on to handle more pressing issues. The first call I made was to my father to check on the status of the store project. He told me construction was progressing well, including a 3-bedroom apartment being built on the 2nd floor. He also mentioned we had secured a franchise deal, which would be a major advantage. When I asked how long until everything was ready, he estimated about 10 weeks. "I'll take over the store and live in the apartment," I said. "Also, I need you to find me a solid civil attorney and a top-notch divorce lawyer. I'll explain later." After that, I called the farmer who had sold us the land and asked if he had a room I could use until the apartment was finished. Without hesitation, he offered me a place to stay, refusing any payment and reminding me of how much he appreciated what my family had done for him. I let him know I'd arrived the next day. By mid-morning, I walked into my boss, Jace Redding's office, and quit on the spot. Naturally, he asked why, so I showed him footage of the finished 3rd floor of my house, including a framed photo of him with his family. His face darkened as he realized what he was looking at. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice tense. "It's from my own house," I replied flatly. "That part of the house wasn't supposed to be remodeled." I followed that by showing him a short clip of his son, Jack, engaged in an explicit act with my wife, Marcy. Jace, a man known for his staunch religious beliefs, looked utterly disgusted. "That's my wife," I said, keeping my tone steady. "This is why I'm leaving. I need to focus on fighting for custody of my daughters." Jace didn't hesitate to call his accountant, instructing him to cut my final paycheck and add a $10,000 bonus as compensation for his son's betrayal. He looked at me apologetically. "Are you sure the kids aren't his?" he asked hesitantly. "I'm certain," I said. "This has been going on for some time, but not long enough for that." He suggested I consider a DNA test, but I told him that Jack could request one if he felt the need. I also asked Jace to keep everything I'd shared with him private, as I wanted Marcy to discover later that her secret was out. "I'm ashamed of what my son's done," Jace said after a long silence. "When he gets back, he's finished. We've had rumors about him being involved with married women, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." True to his word, Jace fired Jack and cut him out of the family inheritance, citing his disgraceful behavior and the injury he'd caused. Later, after cashing my check, draining the joint accounts, and settling my bill at the auto shop, I went to my daughter's school. I arranged to meet with them in the presence of their guidance counselor to ensure there was no chance of my intentions being misinterpreted. During the conversation, I learned that Jack had been living upstairs for 3 years. Marcy had introduced him to the girls as a distant cousin, and over time, he became a regular presence in their lives. Eventually, Marcy insisted the girls refer to him as Uncle. I decided it was time to be honest with them. I explained that Jack wasn't family, but was, in fact, their mother's lover. I told them about the divorce, and that, for now, they would remain with Marcy until I could establish a stable home and fight for custody. The counselor supported my approach and provided her contact information. "Tell your lawyer to reach out to me," she said. "I'll give a statement. Too many fathers lose their kids unfairly in situations like this." I hugged my daughters and watched them return to class, feeling a renewed sense of purpose to build a better life for them. Before heading home, I stopped at a flower shop and asked for the oldest, most wilted flowers they had. After some initial confusion, the clerk brought out a batch from the trash, which I had boxed up. Back at the house, I placed the box on the master bed, along with the card my daughters had signed for Uncle Jack and a shredded piece of Marcy's baby doll lingerie. I'd cut it apart with her sewing scissors as a final touch. After that, I loaded my tools into my truck, securing them with a tarp to keep them safe. While I worked, my neighbor, John, came over. "I guess you finally found out about Marcy's second husband," he said casually. "Second husband?" I asked, startled. "Yeah, that's what we all called him. He's been around for years." "I just learned today," I admitted. "It's been going on for at least 3 years. I quit my job this morning. I'm going to focus on proving I can provide a stable home and fight for custody of my daughters." John offered to let me park my truck in his garage and suggested I stick around to see how things played out that evening. I agreed and moved the truck. That night, I watched from John's garage as Marcy arrived home. She went straight to the bedroom, where she found the box on the bed. At first, she smiled, likely thinking it was a gift from Jack. She picked up the card and set it aside, then reached for the baby doll lingerie. Her smile faltered as she realized it had been torn to shreds. Confusion flashed across her face, but she didn't seem to suspect anything yet. Finally, she opened the box of dead flowers. The stench hit her immediately, and she recoiled, looking both nauseous and puzzled. She seemed to assume the gesture was Jack's doing, perhaps an odd way of signaling the end of their affair. It was clear she hadn't connected the dots that I was the one behind it all. This was just the beginning. I had much more planned. I watched as my 2 daughters got off the school bus and headed toward the house. A text from Lauren popped up on my phone. "Call us, but don't say anything. We want you to hear what we have to tell Mom. She needs to hear the truth, just like you've always taught us." I explained the situation to my neighbor John, who was still nearby. When I put the call on speaker, "We'll need to stay completely quiet," I told him. "That way we can both hear everything clearly." The girls walked straight to their mother's bedroom. Marcy was still sitting there, clearly shaken and confused by the messages I had left earlier. She didn't seem to understand the full weight of what was happening. After greeting their mom as though it were just another day, my daughters began their conversation. Dad called us out of class today. He said he wanted to talk to us in private, Linda started. From her expression, I could tell they had her attention. She looked concerned, unsure of what was coming. He met us in the school counselor's office, Lauren added. We didn't understand why, especially since you told us he wouldn't be home until 6. Then he asked Miss Connor, the counselor, to stay with us while he talked. The first thing Dad asked was, "Who is Uncle Jack and how long has he been staying with us?" Linda continued. I explained that you told us he was a distant cousin who moved back to the area. Marcy's face changed immediately. Fear began to settle in. It was clear now that she knew who had left the messages in the bedroom. Dad had no idea you had the 3rd floor renovated while he was on the road. You said it was supposed to be a surprise for him, Lauren said. But now we know that wasn't true. We kept your secret like you asked. And wow, was it ever a surprise for Dad? Linda added with a bitter edge. He told us he didn't find out about it until today, Lauren went on. Mom, you've always taught us not to lie, but I guess we figured out that it's okay for you to lie. To him, to us, to everyone in the family. Marcy started crying, tears streaming down her face. She didn't interrupt, she just listened. Dad didn't know Jack had been renting the 3rd floor for over 3 years, Linda said. We had to explain to him that whenever he was away, you never slept in the bed you shared with him when he was home. We knew because the bed never needed to be made before you left for work, Lauren pointed out. Marcy's face turned pale. Her daughters were laying everything bare, and even something as small as an unmade bed had unraveled her. The same mother who always told them to start their day by making their beds was now caught by her own rules. We told Dad we never actually saw you and Uncle Jack together, but we did see you coming downstairs from the 3rd floor in the mornings when he wasn't home, Lauren said. Dad told us that he and you are getting a divorce because Jack isn't family. He's your lover, the man you've been hiding from him for years. Linda's voice grew firmer. Dad told us that you've been using him for a long time to support Jack's lifestyle and yours, not for the good of our family. He said that makes him feel like his entire life with you has been a lie. He also said that since he quit his job today, he's going to start looking for something local so he can fight for custody of us. Miss Connor explained that Dad had no choice but to quit. Linda continued. She said the court wouldn't consider giving custody to a long-haul trucker. After he said goodbye, we went back to class, but it was hard to focus. Marcy sat on the bed, her body shaking as she cried. She couldn't deny what they were saying. It was all true. She knew Heath was preparing to fight for custody, and as a social worker, she was well aware of what the court would consider in their evaluations. Eventually, we broke down in class, Linda said quietly. Miss Connor had to pull us out for the rest of the day to talk things through and help us calm down. We learned something new today, Mom, Lauren said, her voice cutting. Sleeping with another man while you're married is infidelity. Miss Connor said it's the biggest insult one spouse can give the other. If it mattered to you, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, Linda added. Miss Connor wondered how you thought you could live with 2 husbands and no one would notice. Marcy seemed to mutter something to herself, but it wasn't audible. She must have been trying to rationalize things, probably thinking Heath was her husband and Jack was just a lover, but even she seemed to realize that to everyone else, it looked like she'd been living a double life. Lauren's voice broke the silence. Linda and I talked, and we decided that you must not only hate Dad, but probably hate us too. That's the only explanation for why you did this for so long. Linda chimed in, her words sharp and deliberate. Miss Connor told us that no one who loves or respects their spouse would ever treat them the way you treated Dad. She said what you did is beyond cruel. Marcy's sobs grew louder, her body trembling. She never expected to be confronted like this, least of all by her own daughters. Their words were blunt and unflinching, forcing her to see the consequences of her actions. Before we got on the bus, Linda said, Miss Connor asked if we felt okay to go home or if we needed her to drive us. We told her we'd be fine. We wanted time to talk. She also said she would testify about what happened today if it comes up in court, Lauren added. She's seen too many men ruined by lies like this and said she has a duty to tell the truth. We whispered a lot on the bus ride home, Linda concluded. We've made some decisions of our own. Marcy completely broke down, burying her face in her hands. Mom, Lauren began firmly, we may only be 12, but it won't be long before we're old enough to decide who we want to live with. Miss Connor told us that when we turn 13, we can make that decision ourselves. And we've already decided it's going to be Dad. Lauren continued without hesitation. We're going downstairs to call Grandma. She'll come and get us, and I'm sure she and Grandpa will let us stay with them until Dad has things sorted out. That way, you and Jack can have the whole house to yourselves. She turned to Linda. Let's go pack and make the call. Before leaving the room, Linda turned back to their mother. One last question, Mom. Were you trying to make us bond with Uncle Jack so it would be easier for us to accept him as your second husband without Dad knowing? Her tone was cutting. Because it sure seems like you were. Marcy didn't respond. She just sat there, devastated, tears streaming down her face, as her daughters walked out to call their grandmother. Her daughters had clearly inherited their father's logical approach to problems. They had pieced together the situation with unflinching clarity and drawn their own conclusions. I sent Marcy a quick text. What you found on the bed? That was me. Let your so-called common-law husband know I'll be suing him for financial support for you and the girls. From my vantage point with binoculars, I watched her slowly piece it all together. As she realized that I planned to present everything, her lies, her hidden lifestyle, her betrayal, in court, it became clear she understood she would lose any chance of keeping custody of our daughters. Marcy was defeated. She could see there was no good ending to this. The looming lawsuits and exposure of her relationship with Jack would destroy both of them. John and I timed it. Less than 15 minutes later, her parents arrived. John cracked open his front door, curious if the voices from next door would carry. They did, and they were loud enough to leave no doubt that tempers were flaring. Marcy's mother tore into her as she led the girls out the front door. Her anger was palpable, but it was her father who delivered the most brutal blow. Well, he said coldly, since you've driven Heath out of your life, I guess once things fall apart with Jack, you'll just find another long-distance driver to replace him. Jack's already shown he doesn't respect you. He's perfectly fine with you sleeping with someone else. And you've made it clear, by your behavior, that one man will never be enough to satisfy you. From where we stood, John and I could see Marcy crumble under her father's words. She was sobbing so hard she couldn't respond. Her mother added with icy finality, "We'll be contacting child services tomorrow to figure out the next steps. After all, it was your daughters who called us and explained why they wanted out of this house. They made us proud. They've clearly been raised well. Unfortunately, we can't say the same about you." John shut the door, then headed to his kitchen to grab a couple of beers. I followed him. "Your daughters nailed it, Heath," John said, handing me a beer. "You should be proud. To be honest, when the construction crew was working, Marcy told us the third floor was a rental unit. She claimed you needed extra income and had decided to rent it out." "That's a complete lie," I replied. "The house and land were fully paid for. I remodeled the entire place myself, floor by floor, just because I had the time and wanted to." "So she lied from day one," John said, shaking his head. "Where do you think the money came from to finish the third floor?" "Not from us," I said firmly. "I haven't seen a single cent of income from that so-called rental." "My guess? Jack used his trust fund to pay for it, and he probably reimbursed himself later." I pulled out my phone and selected Marcy's contact. "Let me know if you can spot her," I told John. "I want to send a text and see how she reacts." A couple of minutes later, John gave me the signal. "She's back in her bedroom. Looks like she's trying to calm down." I typed out a short, blunt message and hit send. "Hey, to the queen of open invitations, Jace Redding and I both want to know, given your long-term relationship with his son, are Linda and Lauren mine or Jack's? Jace plans to file a lawsuit to find out." John's reaction was immediate. "Oh my God, she's lost it," he said. "She just threw her phone against the wall." He peeked again. "Now she's on the bed sobbing like crazy." John turned back to me with a curious grin. "What on earth did you send her?" "Just the truth," I replied calmly. "Jace told me he's been hearing rumors for years about Jack being involved with a married woman. He said the husband didn't know. I figured it was time to ask a question that needs answering for everyone involved." John's face turned pale. He knew Jace's reputation and how far he'd go to uncover the truth. About 30 minutes later, I asked John to check on Marcy again. "She's in the living room now, sitting on the couch," he reported. I sent her the final blow, a 5-minute video clip of her performing an explicit act with Jack. The clip ended with Jack's face clearly visible. Along with it, I sent a single line. "Who filmed this?" After a moment, I sent a follow-up. "I took the disc. Maybe I'll figure out the answer when I watch more." John returned moments later, wide-eyed. "Marcy's lost it again. She threw up all over the living room rug." He looked at me, half laughing, half stunned. I don't even want to know what you said this time. I left at 5 in the morning, heading out after sending videos to everyone we knew, friends and enemies alike. Along with the footage, I included a message. This is what I showed to Jace Redding when he asked why I had to quit my job. The second video was filmed in the same bedroom with help from someone else. Neighbors say Jack Redding is Marcy's second husband, and Marcy told them I was fine with the arrangement. That's a lie. I found out yesterday, and I'm filing for divorce and suing Jack Redding for numerous reasons. It wasn't going to be a pleasant morning for many people. After sending the messages, I stopped at a truck stop on the edge of town and ordered a hearty trucker's breakfast. From my booth, I could see my truck parked just outside the window as I sipped my coffee. Marcy's younger sister, Maureen, walked in and spotted me. "I'm so sorry, Heath. No man deserves what you've been through," she said softly. "Mind if I join you?" I nodded and she slid into the seat across from me. For a moment, we sat in silence as I savored the coffee. "Mom and Dad told me everything last night," Maureen began. "The girls explained everything after they got to their house. Just so you know, this blindsided all of us." She paused, then added, "If you ever change your number, please let us know. We won't share it with Marcy." "The number isn't changing," I assured her. "I was planning to quit in 2 months anyway. The girls are getting older, and I wanted to be home in the evenings as they start their teenage years." Maureen's frustration spilled out. "What was my sister thinking? There's no way in hell you would have agreed to her having a second husband." "I doubt we'll ever really know," I replied. "Maybe it started as something innocent that went too far, or maybe she's been hiding her true self all along. Either way, she seemed to enjoy herself. From what I've heard, it's been going on a lot longer than the 3 years we know about." "What do you mean?" Maureen asked, her brow furrowing. "When I told Jace why I was quitting, he mentioned hearing rumors that Jack had been involved with a married woman for years. He even asked if Linda and Lauren might be Jack's children." Maureen's face went pale. "Oh, God. Who else knows?" I pulled out my phone and let her read the text I had sent Marcy the night before. Then I showed her the message I sent out that morning. As she scrolled through, tears welled up in her eyes. She already knew things were bad, but now it was clear they were far worse. The video hinted that their relationship wasn't just between two people. "By the end of today, everyone will know," I said. "Jace will go public in his pursuit of the truth. It's possible both girls are mine or both are Jack's, or maybe neither of us is their biological father. And now I'm left wondering if the person filming that video was male or female." Maureen noticed the tears in my eyes and moved to sit beside me. She held my hand and we sat quietly until the waitress came to take our order. When the food arrived, I reluctantly let go of her hand so I could eat. Heath and Marcy had married young, both just 19. Maureen, as the youngest bridesmaid, had been quietly infatuated with Heath from the start. Even back then, she thought he was the most handsome man she'd ever seen. And that feeling had never faded. Heath had taken on the demanding job of long-distance trucking so Marcy could finish her degree. When she graduated and started working for the state, she chose a posting in their hometown. At the time, Maureen didn't understand why, but now it was clear. Marcy wanted to be close to Jack, her first love, despite their parents' disapproval. Maureen glanced at Heath. She knew he wasn't ready to hear all of this. Over the years, Heath had been the person she leaned on, the one who helped her see life's problems from every angle. He had a way of turning mountains into molehills. She loved him deeply, and had always compared every man she met to him. No one ever measured up, but now she had to find a way to keep Heath in her life. When the time was right, she would make her feelings known. She was convinced that Marcy had married the wrong sister. "Heath, do you know where you'll be staying?" Maureen asked, breaking the silence. "Linda and Lauren told Mom and Dad they want to live with you. They're angry and hurt, but incredibly proud of their father. They told Mom and Dad they'd tell the court they want to live with you," she continued. "In the meantime, I can bring them to you on weekends if you'd like." I pulled out my notes and handed her an address. "My dad and I are building a gas station and convenience store near here. I'm staying with the farmer who rents the land from us for now, but I'll be moving into the 3-bedroom apartment we're building above the store once it's finished." "Why out there?" Maureen asked, puzzled. "We own 10 acres at each corner of the intersection," I explained. "We're planning to subdivide the land into 3/4-acre lots after developing it. There's nothing else in the area, so the store will be convenient for locals and a draw for others." "How did you even find it?" she asked, surprised. "I was cutting across the country to save time and stumbled on a sign at a 4-way stop. The traffic flow caught my attention. It'll support a business," I replied. Maureen nodded thoughtfully, understanding my reasoning. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the weight of the morning lingered. We both knew the coming days would be tumultuous, but for now, there was a sense of quiet understanding between us. After finishing breakfast, I picked up the check. Maureen leaned over, kissed me on the cheek, just like she always did, and smiled. "Heath," she said softly, "just remember, there are a lot of people who have always loved you for the good man you are." Her words stayed with me as I drove. I called my dad and filled him in on everything. Without hesitation, he promised to find me one of the best divorce attorneys available. The drive to my destination was about 75 miles. By the time I arrived at the construction site, it was a little past 8:30 a.m. A smile crept across my face when I saw the progress. Dad wasn't holding back. The design included 8 fuel pumps for cars and smaller commercial trucks, plus 2 designated for big rigs. The foundations for the spill containment system were already in place, and construction on the building's frame had started. Stepping into the construction trailer, I studied the plans Dad was working from. They were similar to his other projects, but this one included a spacious 400-square-foot apartment on the second floor. Seeing that addition made me smile. He clearly recognized the area's potential. After a couple of hours at the site, I headed over to the farm. Bill Robinson greeted me warmly as I pulled up. He admired my restored Ford truck, reminiscing about the days when vehicles were built tough, with speed and durability in mind. As I parked, Bill's wife, whom he fondly referred to as the Missus, called us in for lunch. It was a hearty farmer's meal, and she chuckled at how much I ate. Afterward, I helped her clean up, drying dishes while she put away leftovers. She noticed my bare ring finger, but didn't comment. By the time we finished, a fresh pot of coffee was ready. We sat down, and I spent the next 2 hours recounting the chaos of the past 2 days. Bill assured me that my daughters and their Aunt Maureen would be welcome at the farm any time. "It'd be nice to have kids around again," he said. "Gives me an excuse to fire up the grill." I texted Maureen, inviting her to visit every Friday and stay through the weekend. She replied almost immediately. "It's a date." Later that afternoon, I reviewed the disc on my laptop. The video, unfortunately, didn't show any other faces. Using my phone as a hotspot, I sent everything to my father, including the contact information for Miss Connor, the school counselor. I also asked him to work with Jace Redding to pinpoint Jack's location and serve him as soon as possible. Marcy would be served at her office in town. For good measure, I uploaded the incriminating video and sent it along. Out of spite, I sent Marcy a text. "I've seen the whole video. Let's just say it's not award-winning material. Plenty of others have done better performances." By the time school let out, Maureen and my daughters were on the road. Maureen, a tax specialist, was thankfully in her slow season, giving her the flexibility to drive. The girls couldn't stop texting me, sending updates every 10 to 15 minutes. The 75-mile trip flew by, and they texted one last time when they reached the driveway. Linda and Lauren leaped out of the car and ran straight into my arms. Bill and the Missus, whose name I finally learned was Betty, welcomed everyone warmly. The girls were thrilled with the room Betty had prepared for them. While she finished making dinner, Bill gave everyone a tour, pointing out the swing set, a swimming pond, and small motorcycles they could ride, with my permission. After dinner, the girls and I cleaned up the kitchen while Betty put away the dishes. Bill entertained them with stories about the farm and promised them a busy weekend of fun activities. Once the kids went to bed, Maureen and I had some time to talk. "Heath," she said, her voice heavy with emotion, "these past few days have been a whirlwind. Everything's coming out now. Jack was the boy Marcy used to sneak out to see when we were kids. That's how long they've been involved." I nodded, the pieces finally clicking into place. "It all makes sense now. I was the safe, dependable one. Jack was her wild side, and he took full advantage of that. He'll run when this all comes crashing down, and Marcy will be left with nothing." Maureen sighed. "Mom and Dad spoke with child services. If you give written permission, they can keep the girls until you're settled. They also interviewed the girls and told us there's no way Marcy will get custody. Her lifestyle disqualifies her completely." Her words hit me hard, and tears started streaming down my face. I tried to tell her to leave so I could process everything, but she refused. Instead, she stayed by my side. Meanwhile, Marcy sat at her kitchen table, overwhelmed by the events of the past 2 days. Thursday had been relatively quiet, but Friday had been anything but. At work, she was served with legal papers. Jace Redding was suing to determine if he was biologically related to her daughters. The truth was, she couldn't even be certain. It had been so long since the girls were conceived that the details were hazy. She had underestimated Heath. At first, she dismissed his threats as anger-driven outbursts, but when she saw the text he sent to all their friends and family, everything changed. The message was clear, and the damage was irreversible. Her lawyer explained that Jack legally qualified as her common-law partner from the moment she moved him into the house. That meant Heath's lawsuit against Jack would likely succeed, and the only question now was how much Jack would owe. The lawyer also told her that Heath's long-standing dedication to his family would make him a sympathetic figure in divorce court. She realized too late that he had every advantage, while she had none. For the first time, Marcy grasped the full extent of what she'd lost. Heath wasn't just going to win, he was going to move on without her, leaving her to deal with the wreckage. If Marcy had been able to prove Jack was contributing financially, such as by providing bank statements showing consistent rent payments over the last 3 years, her situation might have been different. Instead, there was no evidence to support that he had contributed anything toward household expenses. The court was left with the impression that Jack had been nothing more than a kept man. The real blow came at the end of the day when her supervisor called her into the office. The news was direct and devastating. "Marcy, I'm aware that you visited Mr. and Mrs. Klaus Rubenstein after hours on Thursday regarding a custody issue. They explained everything that happened the night before and asked for the state's guidance." Her supervisor's tone was icy. "I spoke with the children and advised the grandparents that if they obtained written consent from the father, the state would recognize them as temporary custodians until the court decides the case. And yes, I know they're your parents." Marcy's stomach dropped. Her supervisor continued, unflinching. "I can't transfer you yet, but as soon as a position opens elsewhere, I will. I also can't terminate you, but your reputation as a social worker in this area is ruined. No one will take your word on anything. Effective immediately, you're relegated to office work, and your entire caseload is being reassigned." Marcy had no defense. She knew she had only herself to blame. Her relentless pursuit of Jack had led her here. And now the consequences were undeniable. Saturday was packed with activity at the farm. Linda and Lauren were ecstatic when Bill walked them through the basics of operating the small motorcycles parked in the yard. Watching them, it was clear they were naturals. After 2 hours, Bill called it a day. "You'll be sore tomorrow if you don't stop now," he said. "And since you're already sweaty, go cool off in the pond." Betty and Maureen were growing closer, sharing laughter and stories as they prepped dinner. Around 4 in the afternoon, the girls were called inside to help. Since they'd never done much cooking, I went to check on them and found them peeling potatoes and chopping onions around the kitchen table, under Betty's watchful eye. Meanwhile, Bill fired up the grill to cook steaks, and I pitched in where I could. Dinner was a hit. Perfectly grilled steaks, potato salad, and baked beans, served outdoors at the picnic table. What struck me was that neither the TV nor their phones had been touched all day. It was as if the twins were discovering an entirely new way of life. By evening, they decided to head to bed early, worn out from the day's adventures. The rest of us stayed up, sharing a few beers and playing cards before calling it a night. Sunday after lunch, Maureen and the girls headed home. Before they left, Maureen handed me a handwritten witnessed letter granting Klaus and Betty temporary custody of the twins. Early Monday morning, Klaus called to thank me for getting the letter to him so quickly. He had taken it to the office himself, where it was copied for official records. The state had issued a legal notice confirming their temporary custodianship. As we chatted, Klaus shared details about Marcy and Jack's long-standing relationship, opening my eyes to things I hadn't known. On Friday morning, Jack Redding was served with legal papers in Austin, Texas, while picking up a shipment of medical equipment. At the same time, Marcy was served at the social services office. That afternoon, I received a text from Maureen asking for my waist size. When I asked why, she replied, "So we can go swimming with the girls." I texted back, 34. Later, while on a walk, I got a message from Marcy. It read, "Have you calmed down enough to talk?" I responded bluntly, "Nothing to talk about. Your parents and Maureen filled me in on everything, from sneaking out to meet Jack to where you are now. What I'm trying to figure out is this. If he's always been the one, why did you marry me?" She didn't reply. When Maureen arrived with the girls, their excitement was contagious. As Linda and Lauren ran to hug me, Maureen's radiant smile lit up the moment. After a warm hug from her, the girls asked me a quiet question, to which I nodded. The twins ran to greet Bill and Betty, and Maureen surprised me with a firm kiss on the lips, catching me off guard. "You need to hear what the girls just asked." I told her. We turned to listen as Maureen slipped her hand into mine. Lauren began, "We were wondering if it's okay to call you Grandpa and Grandma." Linda added, "Only if that's all right with you." Betty teared up, clearly overwhelmed. "Of course," she said, her voice trembling. Later she confided that she'd always longed to hear those words, but thought she never would, having been unable to have children of her own. After dinner, I updated Maureen on the situation. "Both Marcy and Jack have been served. It's official now." I showed her the last text I'd received from Marcy in my response. "She can't justify her actions," Maureen said. "If she tried, she'd have to face the truth about herself. And I don't think she's capable of that." "Enough about your sister," I replied. "When are you going to find someone who loves you the way you deserve?" "Don't be surprised, Heath," she said with a soft smile. "I already have. The real challenge is getting him to see it." The next morning, Bill and I, both early risers, were enjoying freshly perked coffee outside. "Heath," he said, his tone thoughtful, "Betty is my second wife. My first did to me what Marcy's done to you." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "To remind you not to let your pain blind you to what's in front of you. Maureen has been here for you since day one. When you're ready, ask yourself why." His words lingered. I began to wonder, could Maureen want more? And if so, why? "What made you realize Betty was interested in you?" I asked. Bill chuckled. "A cast iron skillet to the head. Figuratively speaking. She caught a neighbor girl flirting with me and made it clear how she felt. We couldn't have kids of our own, so we fostered for years. It gave us a purpose and a bond." His story gave me a lot to think about as I watched the sunrise over the farm. Our conversation ended as the rest of the household began to stir. The sound of voices and movement signaled the start of another busy day. After the twins spent 3 hours riding the motorcycles, they were ready to cool off, so we all headed to the pond. Bill and Betty brought down lawn chairs and watched us play a lively game of beach ball volleyball. Maureen looked incredible in her white bikini, her auburn hair pinned back, and her movements full of energy and grace. As she chased after the ball, her laughter rang out, and her confidence was impossible to ignore. I found myself captivated by her, something Bill's recent words had made me see differently. As we walked to the pond, I couldn't help but notice her effortless stride and the slight sway of her hips. The pond was deeper than I expected, fed by a small creek with a charming waterfall Bill had created by stacking railroad ties in a low section of the land. Our games were lighthearted and filled with laughter. We teamed up differently each round, with my daughters taking turns diving from my shoulders while I lifted them up from beneath the water. Eventually, Bill and Betty headed back to prepare dinner, and Linda and Lauren decided to join them. Maureen and I stayed in the pond, enjoying the quiet. Feeling playful, I dove beneath the surface and came up between her legs, flipping her into the water. She emerged laughing, her hair soaked, and her face glowing with joy. She swam closer, and as our eyes met, something shifted. I saw an emotion I hadn't recognized before. Without a word, we leaned into each other, our lips meeting in a kiss that was electric, filled with more passion and connection than I'd ever experienced. "Wow," I murmured, pulling back slightly. "That was intense," she smiled, her voice soft but confident. "You don't know how long I've waited for this." We embraced, the water surrounding us as we held each other tightly, sharing more kisses, our connection deepening with every touch. The world around us faded away until Bill's distant call broke through. "Supper will be ready in 20 minutes. We reluctantly broke apart and headed back to the house to change. As soon as we stepped inside, Betty gave us a knowing look. "Well, it seems like things are starting to fall into place," she said, grinning. "How did you manage to clue him in?" she asked Maureen. "She didn't," Bill interjected, laughing. "I told him about your legendary cast-iron frying pan swing." The twins overheard and demanded the story, which Bill happily shared, much to their delight. After supper, when the girls had gone to bed, tired out from fresh air and activity, I sat on the porch swing, enjoying the stillness. Maureen joined me, settling in beside me. I wrapped an arm around her as she leaned against my shoulder. "My mom figured it out last week when I brought the twins home," she said. "She told me I looked happier than I had in years, so I guess my poker face isn't as good as I thought." "How did she take it?" I asked. "I'm sure she has concerns with everything going on." "She asked if anything was happening yet, and I told her no," Maureen replied. "Then she asked how long I'd been in love with you. I told her, since the summer before you married Marcy." I was stunned. That long? And it took all of this for me to notice? I was expecting a lecture, Maureen admitted, smiling softly. Instead, she said if it works out, she'll help Dad come around. Then she told me something I didn't know. Her dad was my aunt's cast-off, and she thanks her sister for that every single day. As Maureen kissed me goodbye on Sunday, Lauren turned to Linda, who seemed surprised. Aunt Maureen has been in love with Dad for years, she whispered. It took what Mom did for him to finally figure it out. If Aunt Maureen gets her way, they'll be married as soon as the divorce is final. As they drove off, I couldn't help but wonder how my daughter had figured it out so easily. Monday morning, Bill suggested we take a walk. As we crossed the bridge over the creek to a nearby section of land, he gestured to the spot. This would be a great place to build a house, he said. That way Linda and Lauren could come over any time to ride the bikes, or the horses Betty and I are planning to buy. Whose idea was this? I asked, curious. Betty and Maureen's. They're planning to pitch it to you next week, he said with a laugh. Klaus called later that morning with surprising news. Jace Redding had obtained a court order for blood tests to determine Lauren and Linda's paternity. Klaus was devastated to learn there was any doubt. He'd believed Marcy's affair with Jack had only been going on for the past 3 years. He was so upset by the revelation that he marched into the social services office and confronted Marcy in front of her co-workers. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead to me, he declared, his voice echoing through the building. Later, my mother-in-law called to inform me that Miss Connor had provided a notarized statement to my lawyer. She mentioned that Jack would be back in town on Wednesday and suggested I stay nearby to keep an eye on things. I arranged to stay with John Sexsmith on Tuesday night. Bill lent me his vehicle so I could slip into town unnoticed. As dusk settled, I called John to confirm he was home before pulling into his driveway. John greeted me warmly, ready to share updates on everything that had been happening. The night felt heavy with anticipation, but I was prepared to face whatever came next. It seemed Marcy had been entertaining another guest at the house since I left, and he was there even now. Peering through John's binoculars, I immediately recognized the man. It was Jack's older married brother, Jason. I called Jace Redding and asked him to come to the address where I was staying. When he arrived, I handed him the key to my house. You need to see this for yourself, I told him. You won't believe what I've uncovered. I explained that I had discovered the identity of the person filming Jack and Marcy. It was Jason, and at that very moment, Jason and Marcy were together in the third-floor bedroom. John and I watched as Jace walked across the street, unlocked the door, and entered my house. What do you think he's going to do when he finds out? John asked. Jace is a proud man, I replied. How he reacts depends entirely on what his pride drives him to do. I just hope it doesn't push him past his breaking point. Moments later, a bang echoed. Fearful, John called emergency. When police, fire, and ambulance arrived, we saw Marcy stumble out of the house, half-dressed, as Jason was led away in handcuffs. Concern replaced our initial amusement when Jace was carried out on a stretcher. John turned on his police scanner, and we learned Jace had entered the third-floor bedroom, and Jason, mistaking him for an intruder, shot him. Thankfully, the wound was to his shoulder and not life-threatening. Marcy, now fully dressed, spotted us outside. Her face went pale when she saw me. I can't believe she was involved with both brothers, John muttered. I suspected someone else, but not him, I replied. I feel for Jace. He didn't deserve this. The next morning, I visited my in-laws. Klaus greeted me early, and over coffee, I explained the events. His wife, Rose, was stunned, but welcomed me warmly. When Linda and Lauren came downstairs, they were thrilled to see me. After taking them to school, I spoke with Rose. We both agreed. Marcy had never truly loved me. Later, I visited Jace in the hospital. His wife hugged me tearfully. This isn't your fault, I reassured her. You're not responsible for your children's choices. Jace managed to smile. You've always kept your cool, Heath. I've come close, I admitted. But I'm afraid if I ever lost it, I wouldn't stop. Jace chuckled. Well, Jason's in jail. Jack's lost his trust fund, and the fallout is a mess. Want to manage the fleet again? I declined, explaining I was pursuing a new chapter. At the transportation center, I watched Jack clock out for the last time. True to form, he left in a rage. Concerned, I asked John to keep an eye on my house. That evening, I surprised Maureen with roses and an invitation to dinner. Her emotional reaction confirmed her feelings. After dinner, John called with urgent news. Jack had returned home drunk and armed, blaming Marcy for everything. Confronting her with a Colt, neighbors heard bangs and called police. Marcy's injuries were severe. Despite surgery, she died from internal bleeding. I broke the news to Maureen, who called her parents. We met them at the hospital. The hardest part was telling Linda and Lauren. Klaus and I agreed on a closed casket funeral. As we planned the arrangements, I reflected on how Marcy's choices had destroyed so many lives. After the burial, Klaus pulled me aside. I had the girls tested. They aren't related to Jace. Also, how long has Maureen loved you? Since the summer before Marcy and I married, I admitted. Klaus smiled faintly. Her sister throwing me away was the best thing that ever happened to me. If you and Maureen work out, you'll have my support. That marked the start of rebuilding my life. 5 years later, I watched Linda and Lauren wait for the bus while Maureen, now my wife, cared for our 2 preschool-age sons. Bill and Betty had become devoted grandparents. Our gas station and store became the heart of the growing village, now with a post office. On warm days, I enjoyed walking from our house by the pond to work. Jace and his wife visited often. Jason had served a short sentence, while Jack was in prison for manslaughter. Jack's ex-wife and kids moved to our village, starting fresh. Our community's name came from a sign Bill painted. We're all here because of circumstances. The name stuck, and so did our new beginning.
I stared in disbelief at the small rectangular box nestled between the seats of Trent's car. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out, the burgundy velvet glinting under the dim garage light. This was the anniversary gift I had been eagerly anticipating for weeks, the one that never materialized. Lifting the lid, I felt my heart sink. Inside lay a sparkling diamond necklace, the price tag still attached. A small note scrawled on the box's inner lining read, "To my darling Clara, love, Trent." My vision blurred as tears welled up. How could this be happening? We had been married for 15 years, and Trent and I had built a comfortable life together. Or so I had thought. This gift, this betrayal, shattered that illusion. As I sank onto the cold cement floor, a crumpled piece of paper caught my eye. Unfolding it, I found a child's drawing, crudely depicting a family of 3, a woman, a man, and a young girl. At the bottom, in wobbly handwriting, were the words, "Daddy Trent." The pieces fell into place. Trent's late nights at the office, his constant excuses to be away from home. He had another family, another life that he was leading behind my back. All those years I had proudly called myself his wife, the mother of his children. It was all a lie. Rage bubbled within me, threatening to consume me. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there. But instead, I took a deep breath and forced myself to think rationally. I needed to gather more evidence, to uncover the full extent of his betrayal, before I confronted him. Carefully, I placed the necklace and the drawing back in the box, tucking it into my purse. As I made my way back to the house, I could feel the weight of what I had discovered pressing down on me. How could I face Trent now, knowing what I knew? The trust we had built over the years, the foundation of our marriage, had crumbled. That night, as Trent sat across the dinner table from me, chatting amiably about his day, I struggled to maintain my composure. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but I held my tongue. I needed to be strategic, to plan my next move carefully. After the children had been put to bed, I followed Trent into the living room where he settled into his favorite armchair, flipping on the TV. Taking a seat beside him, I cleared my throat. "Trent, we need to talk." He glanced up, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong, honey?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "I found something in your car today, something that belongs to someone else." Trent's eyes widened and a flicker of panic crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" "The anniversary gift you never gave me," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "The one you bought for your mistress, Clara." Trent opened his mouth, but no words came out. He sat there frozen, his guilt etched on his features. "And that's not all," I continued, pulling the drawing from my purse and thrusting it at him. "Who's this little girl, Trent? Another one of your secrets." Trent's face paled, and he ran a hand through his hair, his usual confident demeanor crumbling. "Rena, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped, holding up a hand to silence him. "I don't want your excuses. I want the truth. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, the finality of my statement sending a chill through the room. Trent stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. In that moment, I knew this was the end of our marriage, the end of the life I had known. but I was done being the victim. It was time to take control of my own destiny. The tension in the room was palpable as Trent and I stared at each other, the silence punctuated only by the muffled sound of the television. I could see the cogs turning in his mind, scrambling to come up with some feeble excuse, but I was done listening to his lies. "Well?" I snapped, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Trent cleared his throat, his eyes darting around the room, anywhere but meeting my gaze. "Rena, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "Sorry?" I scoffed, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the air. "You're sorry? Do you have any idea how much this hurts? How much you've betrayed me and our family?" He winced, his shoulders slumping, and I knew I had struck a nerve. "Good. Let him feel the weight of his actions." "It's not what you think," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the floor. "It's a complicated situation." I let out a humorless laugh. "Complicated? Trent, you're having an affair and you've got another child. How is that in any way complicated?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his brow furrowed in a futile attempt to find the right words. I watched as the realization dawned on him. There was no way to spin this, no way to make it sound even remotely acceptable. I don't know what to say," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Say?" I leaned forward, my eyes blazing with fury. "How about you start by admitting that you're a liar and a cheater, that you've been living a double life, betraying our marriage and our family?" Trent flinched, and I knew I had struck a nerve. Good. Let him feel the weight of his actions. "Rena, please," he pleaded, reaching out to me. "I know this looks bad, but don't you dare touch me," I snarled, jerking away from his outstretched hand. "You lost the right to do that the moment you decided to stick your dick in someone else." Trent's face flushed, and he opened and closed his mouth a few times, like a fish out of water. I took a grim satisfaction in seeing him squirm, his usual air of confidence and control completely shattered. I don't know what to say," he finally managed, his voice trembling. "That's the problem, Trent," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "You've said enough. Now it's time for you to listen." I reached into my purse and pulled out the box containing the diamond necklace, tossing it onto his lap. "This is your darling Clara's gift, isn't it? And this," I dropped the child's drawing on top of the box, "is your other family, isn't it?" Trent stared at the items, his face a mask of shame and guilt. I watched as he ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic I had come to recognize over the years. "Rena, I can explain." "No," I cut him off, my voice firm. "I don't want your explanations. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Trent's eyes widened, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of fear in them. "Good. Let him be afraid." "A divorce?" he sputtered. But what about Evelyn? You can't just abandon her. She needs us." I felt my jaw tighten, the mention of my insufferable mother-in-law only fueling my anger. "Don't you dare try to guilt me, Trent. Evelyn is your problem now. I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to take responsibility for your actions." Trent opened his mouth, but no words came out. He sat there staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and desperation, and I knew in that moment that the balance of power had shifted. I was no longer the victim, but the one in control. In the days that followed my confrontation with Trent, I felt a sense of renewed purpose. The initial shock and heartbreak had given way to a steely determination to take control of my life. I started freelancing again, leveraging my marketing expertise to build up a stable income stream. Trent, of course, was less than thrilled about this, insisting that my place was at home, caring for Evelyn and the children. "Rena, you can't just abandon your responsibilities," he would argue, his brow furrowed in frustration. "Evelyn needs you, and the kids need a stable home." I would simply fix him with a hard stare, my lips pressed into a thin line. "Trent, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm taking care of myself for a change. You can handle Evelyn and the children. After all, you seem to have plenty of experience juggling multiple families." The jab would instantly wipe the self-righteous expression off his face, and he would sulk off, muttering under his breath. I took a grim satisfaction in knowing that I had the upper hand now, that I held the power to make his life just as miserable as he had made mine. As I worked tirelessly, building up my freelance business, I also made it a point to thoroughly document Trent's misdeeds. I combed through our financial records, uncovering a trail of suspicious expenses. Expensive dinners, lavish gifts, even a down payment on a second apartment. It was clear that Trent had been pouring a significant amount of our family's resources into maintaining his secret life with Clara. Armed with this evidence, I began to quietly siphon funds into a separate account, stashing away money for my own future. Trent, of course, remained blissfully unaware of my activities, too focused on his own devious schemes to pay much attention to our household finances. As Evelyn's health continued to decline, Trent's neglect of her became increasingly evident. I would often arrive home to find the house in disarray, Evelyn's needs unattended to. It infuriated me, but I remained outwardly calm, biding my time and carefully planning my next move. One particularly trying day, I arrived home to find Evelyn sitting in her wheelchair, her hair disheveled and her clothes stained. Trent was nowhere to be seen, and when I asked Evelyn where he was, she merely shrugged, her eyes glazed over with a mix of confusion and resentment. "That no-good son of mine is off doing God knows what," she grumbled, her voice laced with bitterness, "leaving me here to rot, just like he does every day." I bit my tongue, swallowing the retort that threatened to spill out. Instead, I gently helped Evelyn into the bathroom, carefully bathing and dressing her. As I brushed her hair, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the old woman. Beneath her caustic exterior, she was just as much a victim of Trent's betrayal as I was. Later that night, as Trent stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and the familiar scent of Clara's perfume, I confronted him. "Trent, we need to talk about Evelyn. She's not doing well, and you're hardly ever here to help." He waved a dismissive hand, his gaze unfocused. "Evelyn's fine, Rena. She's got you to take care of her, doesn't she? That's what you're here for, after all." I felt my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Trent, this isn't sustainable. Evelyn needs more attention and care than I can provide on my own. We need to start looking into assisted living options for her." Trent's eyes widened, and he shook his head vehemently. "Absolutely not. I'm not putting my mother in some home. She belongs here, with her family." "Then you need to start being a part of this family, Trent," I retorted, my voice strained. "Evelyn is your responsibility too, and you're failing her just as much as you're failing me and the kids." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm done discussing this. I've already started looking into options for Evelyn, and I'll be making the necessary arrangements, with or without your input." Trent glared at me, his jaw clenched, but I could see the hint of fear in his eyes. He knew I was serious, that I was no longer willing to be the dutiful wife and caretaker. I was taking control of my own life, and there was nothing he could do to stop me. As Evelyn's demands grew more and more taxing, I found myself increasingly isolated. Trent's disinterest in his mother's care only intensified, and he spent more and more time with Clara, leaving me to shoulder the burden alone. I would come home to find Evelyn in her wheelchair, her medications scattered on the floor and her dinner untouched. She would berate me endlessly, her sharp tongue lashing out with a venomous fury that only added to my exhaustion. "Where's that useless son of mine?" she would snarl, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Off gallivanting with his whore, no doubt. And you, Rena, you're just as useless, letting this place fall to pieces." I would grit my teeth, biting back the retort that threatened to spill out. Instead, I would silently tend to Evelyn's needs, carefully administering her medications and ensuring she was fed and comfortable. It was a thankless task, but I knew I had to keep my composure if I wanted to execute my plan. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Trent burst through the front door, his face flushed and his eyes wild. "Rena, we need to talk," he announced, his voice quivering with a strange mixture of panic and excitement. I turned to face him, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "What is it, Trent?" He took a deep breath, his gaze darting around the room as if he was afraid someone might overhear. "It's Clara. She's pregnant." I felt my heart drop, the dish towel slipping from my grasp as a wave of nausea washed over me. Of course, I had suspected as much, but hearing the confirmation still hit me like a punch to the gut. "Pregnant?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I suppose you're the father." Trent nodded, a strange glint of pride in his eyes. Yes, I am. And I want you to leave, Rena. I want a divorce. I want to be with Clara and our child." I stared at him, my mind reeling. After all this time, after all the pain and betrayal, he had the audacity to demand a divorce on his terms, as if I was some inconvenience to be discarded. "You want me to leave?" I repeated, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You're the one who's been having an affair, Trent. You're the one who's been living a double life and betraying our family, and now you have the nerve to tell me to leave?" Trent held up his hands, a placating gesture. "Rena, please, try to understand. This is my chance to start a new life, to be a father to my child. I can't be tied down to you and Evelyn anymore." I felt my fingers curl into fists, my nails digging into the palms of my hands. Tied down? Is that how you see me, Trent? As some burden to be cast aside? He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off, my voice rising in pitch. "No, Trent, you don't get to make this decision for me. I'm the one who's been betrayed, who's been left to pick up the pieces of your selfish, despicable actions. And I'm not going anywhere." Trent's eyes widened, and he took a step back, as if he had not anticipated my vehement refusal. "Rena, you don't understand," he tried to explain, his voice tinged with desperation. "This is my chance to be happy, to have the family I always wanted." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. "The family you always wanted? Trent, you already had a family. You had a wife and children who loved you, and you threw that all away for some cheap affair and a mistress who's now carrying your child." Trent's face flushed, and he opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand, silencing him. "No, Trent, you made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I'm not leaving, and I'm not giving you a divorce. You're going to have to deal with me, with Evelyn, and with the mess you've created." The finality in my tone seemed to hit Trent like a physical blow, and he stared at me, his mouth working soundlessly. I could see the realization dawning on him, that he had underestimated my resilience, my willingness to fight for what was rightfully mine. In that moment, I felt a surge of power, a sense of control that I hadn't experienced in years. Trent was no longer the one in charge. I was. And I was going to use that power to bring him down, to make him pay for the pain he had caused. The tension in the house was palpable as Trent and I faced off, our once loving marriage reduced to a battlefield of accusation and recrimination. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed web of lies was about to unravel. "Rena, please," he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "Think about what you're doing. Think about our family, our children." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Our family, Trent? Don't you mean your family with Clara?" I paused, pinning him with a hard stare. "And as for the children, I'm doing this for them. I'm not going to let them grow up thinking that this kind of betrayal is acceptable." Trent opened his mouth, but before he could speak, I held up a hand, silencing him. "I have evidence, Trent," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I've been documenting everything, your financial misdeeds, your neglect of Evelyn, your affair with Clara, and I'm going to use it all against you." His eyes widened, and I could see the color drain from his face. "Rena, you can't." "I can, and I will," I interrupted, my resolve hardening. "You've betrayed me, Trent. You've betrayed our family, and now you're going to pay the price." Trent ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I had come to recognize over the years. "Rena, please, let's talk about this. We can work something out, I promise." I shook my head, unwavering. "No, Trent, there's nothing to talk about. I want a divorce, and I want it now." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Trent stared at me, his mouth working soundlessly, as the full weight of my demand sank in. But what about Evelyn?" he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't just abandon her, Rena. She needs us." I felt a surge of anger at his pathetic attempt to manipulate me. "Don't you dare try to guilt me, Trent. Evelyn is your responsibility, not mine. You're the one who's been neglecting her, not me." Trent opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, my voice sharp and unyielding. "No, Trent. I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to step up and take care of your own mother. And as for the children, I'll be filing for full custody. You can see them, but only under my terms." Trent's face twisted with a mixture of shock and fury. "You can't do this, Rena. You can't take my children away from me." I held up the manila envelope I had been clutching, the evidence of his misdeeds tucked neatly inside. "I can, and I will, Trent. unless you want me to expose your affair and your financial misdeeds to your family, your friends, and your employer." Trent's eyes widened, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He had underestimated me, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. "Rena, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "I'll do anything. Just don't do this." I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "It's too late for that, Trent. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Trent standing in the middle of the living room, his world crumbling around him. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I was no longer willing to be the victim. It was time to take control of my own destiny, even if it meant destroying the man I had once loved. The air was thick with tension as Trent and I faced off in the middle of the living room, the evidence of his betrayal clutched tightly in my hand. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling. "Rena, please," he pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "Think about what you're doing. Think about our family, our children." I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Our family, Trent? Don't you mean your family with Clara?" I paused, pinning him with a hard stare. "And as for the children, I'm doing this for them. I'm not going to let them grow up thinking that this kind of betrayal is acceptable." Trent opened his mouth, but before he could speak, I held up a hand, silencing him. "I have evidence, Trent," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I've been documenting everything. Your financial misdeeds, your neglect of Evelyn, your affair with Clara, and I'm going to use it all against you." His eyes widened, and I could see the color drain from his face. "Rena, you can't." "I can, and I will," I interrupted, my resolve hardening. "You've betrayed me, Trent. You've betrayed our family, and now you're going to pay the price." Trent ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I had come to recognize over the years. "Rena, please, let's talk about this. We can work something out, I promise." I shook my head, unwavering. "No, Trent, there's nothing to talk about. I want a divorce, and I want it now." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Trent stared at me, his mouth working soundlessly as the full weight of my demand sank in. But what about Evelyn?" he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't just abandon her, Rena. She needs us." I felt a surge of anger at his pathetic attempt to manipulate me. "Don't you dare try to guilt me, Trent. Evelyn is your responsibility, not mine. You're the one who's been neglecting her, not me." Trent opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, my voice sharp and unyielding. "No, Trent, I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to step up and take care of your own mother. And as for the children, I'll be filing for full custody. You can see them, but only under my terms." Trent's face twisted with a mixture of shock and fury. "You can't do this, Rena. You can't take my children away from me." I held up the manila envelope I had been clutching, the evidence of his misdeeds tucked neatly inside. "I can, and I will, Trent, unless you want me to expose your affair and your financial misdeeds to your family, your friends, and your employer." Trent's eyes widened, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He had underestimated me, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. "Rena, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "I'll do anything, just don't do this." I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "It's too late for that, Trent. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Trent standing in the middle of the living room, his world crumbling around him. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I was no longer willing to be the victim. It was time to take control of my own destiny, even if it meant destroying the man I had once loved. As I made my way to the bedroom, I could hear Trent's desperate calls echoing behind me. "Rena, please, don't do this. Think of the children." But I refused to look back, my mind set on the path I had chosen. Once in the bedroom, I locked the door and sank down onto the bed, my hands trembling as I opened the envelope. The evidence was damning. Bank statements, credit card records, even tawdry love letters from Clara. I could feel my heart racing as I sorted through the papers, my resolve hardening with each passing moment. I knew that what I was about to do would change everything, but I was no longer willing to be the victim. Trent had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. With a deep breath, I began making the necessary phone calls. To my lawyer, to Trent's family, to his employer. The words spilled out of me, my voice calm and steady as I laid bare the full extent of Trent's betrayal. As the news of his affair and financial misdeeds began to spread, I could feel the balance of power shifting. Trent's world was crumbling around him, and I took a grim satisfaction in knowing that I was the one who had brought him down. In the aftermath, Trent pleaded with me, begging for a second chance, but I refused to budge. I was done being the dutiful wife, the silent sufferer. It was time for me to take control of my own life, even if it meant sacrificing the man I had once loved. As the divorce proceedings began, I steeled myself for the battles to come. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to fight for my freedom, for my children, and for the life I deserved. The divorce proceedings were a whirlwind of emotions and legal maneuvering, but I remained steadfast in my determination to reclaim my life. Trent, once the confident breadwinner of our family, now found himself on the defensive, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of my evidence. During the heated negotiations, Trent made one last-ditch effort to sway me, appealing to my sense of duty and responsibility. "Rena, think of Evelyn," he pleaded, his eyes desperate. "She needs us, both of us. You can't just abandon her." I leveled him with a cold stare, the memories of his neglect and betrayal fueling my resolve. "Evelyn is your responsibility, Trent, not mine. You've made it clear where your priorities lie, and they don't include your family." Trent opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "No, Trent, I'm done being the dutiful wife and caretaker. It's time for you to step up and take care of your own mother. As for the children, I will be filing for full custody. You can see them, but only under my terms." The color drained from Trent's face, and I could see the panic setting in. He knew that he had lost, that the once formidable control he had wielded over our lives was slipping through his fingers. With a trembling hand, he reached into his pocket and produced a set of keys. "Fine, Rena. Take the house. Take the kids, but promise me you'll at least let me see them occasionally." I regarded him coolly, my lips pressed into a thin line. "Of course, Trent, but understand this. I will not tolerate any more of your lies or your betrayals. If you so much as set a foot out of line, I will make your life a living hell." Trent flinched, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand," he mumbled. As the divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had reclaimed my freedom, yes, my independence, and my children. Trent, on the other hand, was left to face the consequences of his actions. With the help of my lawyer, I exposed the full extent of Trent's infidelity and financial misdeeds to his family, his friends, and his employer. The fallout was swift and merciless, as Trent found himself shunned by those he had once counted as allies. His job, his social standing, and even his relationship with his own mother, Evelyn, who had once been his staunchest defender, all crumbled around him. I watched with a grim satisfaction as he spiraled into a pit of despair, his once confident demeanor reduced to a shadow of its former self. As for Evelyn, she too was forced to confront the reality of her son's failures. With Trent no longer able to provide for her, she reluctantly agreed to move into an assisted living facility, where she would receive the care and attention she so desperately needed. I knew that my decision to leave Trent and divorce him would not be an easy one, but as I settled into our new home with my children, I felt a sense of peace and empowerment that I hadn't experienced in years. I was no longer the victim, but the victor, and I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my career, reconnecting with friends, and providing a stable, loving environment for my children. Trent, meanwhile, struggled to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, his attempts at reconciliation falling on deaf ears. As I watched him spiral downward, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. But it was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of relief and liberation that I felt. I was finally free, and I was determined to make the most of it. As the dust settled on my divorce from Trent, I found myself emerging from the ashes of our shattered marriage with a newfound sense of purpose and freedom. Gone were the days of constantly worrying about Evelyn's demands, Trent's infidelity, and the responsibilities that had once weighed me down. I threw myself into rebuilding my career, leveraging my marketing expertise to secure a series of lucrative freelance contracts. The extra income allowed me to provide a comfortable life for my children and to focus on my own well-being after years of putting everyone else first. Trent, on the other hand, continued to spiral downward. His dismissal from his high-profile job, coupled with the public humiliation of his affair and financial misdeeds, left him a shell of his former self. I watched with a mixture of pity and satisfaction as he struggled to find his footing, his once confident demeanor reduced to a desperate plea for forgiveness. "Raina, please," he begged during one of our court-ordered mediation sessions, his eyes bloodshot and his voice trembling. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right. Can't we work something out?" I regarded him coolly, my arms crossed over my chest. "Work something out, Trent? You had your chance to make things right, and you chose to betray me and our family instead." I paused, shaking my head. "No, Trent, you're going to have to live with the consequences of your actions." Trent opened his mouth to protest, but the mediator quickly intervened, steering the conversation back to the matter at hand, the custody and financial arrangements. In the end, I was granted full custody of our children, with Trent relegated to supervised visitation. He was also required to provide a significant portion of his income as child support, a consequence he clearly resented but was powerless to fight. As I left the courthouse, my children in tow, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and empowerment. The nightmare of my marriage to Trent was finally over, and I was free to rebuild my life on my own terms. Over the next few months, I focused on establishing a stable and nurturing environment for my children. We moved into a cozy apartment, and I made sure to set aside dedicated time for family activities and outings. The kids, who had once been caught in the crossfire of Trent's betrayal, slowly began to blossom, their laughter and joy a testament to the healing power of a loving, stable home. Trent, meanwhile, continued to struggle. He lost his job, his savings depleted by the divorce and child support payments. Evelyn, abandoned by both Trent and Clara, had no choice but to enter an assisted living facility, a decision that only added to Trent's woes. I heard through the grapevine that Trent had tried to reach out to Clara, hoping to rekindle their relationship, but she wanted nothing to do with him. Apparently, even the woman he had betrayed his family for had decided that he was more trouble than he was worth. As I watched Trent's downward spiral, I felt a sense of vindication, but also a twinge of pity. He had lost everything: his family, his career, his social standing. And while a part of me couldn't help but feel a measure of satisfaction in his comeuppance, another part of me recognized the pain and anguish he must be experiencing. But I quickly pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the bright future that lay ahead of me and my children. We had weathered the storm of Trent's betrayal, and we were stronger for it. And as I looked towards the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation for what the future had in store.
Jessica, that's all you get. You owe me $700 for the dumplings at Mila's birthday celebration, a gathering I had never been invited to before. That's what Daisy told me. In front of me, there was just a single dumpling, pointing at it as if feeding a pet. Daisy said with a laugh, "Here you go, Arya." The elementary schooler seemed to be in on the joke too, laughing at me. Mother and daughter both mocking me with the same demonic grin completely extinguished any affection I had for my granddaughter. "I've had enough. I'll just pay the bill and head home," I said, standing up. Daisy, still smiling, waved me off dismissively, disappointed in Arthur, who wouldn't even meet my eyes. If they wanted to celebrate with just their immediate family of 3, that's fine by me. I was willing to pay, but with that attitude, any desire to celebrate had long since vanished. No matter what they say, I'm never getting involved again, I thought irritably as I went to settle the bill. Then someone tapped my shoulder. Hearing her words, I decided to get back at Daisy and her family. "I'm Jessica. This year I turned 65, blessed with children. I've led a normal life, though my husband was always focused on his work and not much of a talker. I believed we had a good relationship. I thought my life was without major upheaval, but there was one thing that troubled me. It was Daisy, my eldest son's wife. I understand that it's common for wives and mothers-in-law to not get along. However, Daisy's attitude of treating me as an enemy just for being the mother-in-law was causing me trouble. Jessica, you're always free at home, right? Let me do you a favor and take care of your cute grandchild. Daisy, I have plans today. I told you I can't do last-minute favors. Remember? I never heard that. Maybe you just think you told me. I never knew what set her off, but Daisy always had a harsh attitude towards me. She'd call suddenly or come over unannounced, dumping tasks on me without caring about my plans. Even if I helped, she'd never thank me, saying a parent should naturally do that much. But if I refused, she'd condemn me as some terrible villain. Lately, I've been finding excuses not to comply with her demands. Yet Daisy would confront me, labeling me as a heartless person, accusing me of treating her poorly or not loving my grandchild. Daisy seemed to truly despise me. The final straw was when Arya, my granddaughter, started elementary school and I was taking care of her after school. Grandma, you're mean to Mom, aren't you? What? No? Why would you say that? That's what Mom says. You always lie and say you don't. Liar. Mom was crying. Apologies. Apparently, Daisy had been telling Arya that I was mean to her, and I was confronted with such accusations from Arya. I had no idea what she was talking about and tried to get the details from Arya, but Arya, seemingly taking Daisy's words at face value, just kept calling me a liar, making it impossible to have a conversation. I couldn't understand why Daisy would manipulate such a young child to dislike me. With no idea what to do or what was even happening, I was at my wit's end. When I talked to my husband, his response was just, "She's a child. She probably doesn't understand yet." He didn't seem too concerned. Consulting my eldest son, Arthur, was no better. His cold reply was, "Handle your own problems, probably just tense around the mother-in-law, worrying about being ordered around because she's the wife." I would never do that. It's unbearable being targeted with such hostility. So what am I supposed to say? Should I tell her to be nicer to Mom? If I do that, it'll look like I'm siding with Mom, and things will become even more strained between us. It's not about taking sides. If she dislikes me, I want to know why. If she wants nothing to do with me, she should keep her distance. Try to understand how it feels to be reluctantly asked for favors. She's the mother of your beautiful grandchild, Mom. Can't you just compromise a little? Arthur's policy of non-intervention always seemed to side with Daisy. No matter how much I pleaded, it felt like he was just brushing me off, telling me to endure it. At times, I couldn't help but vent to my close friends about these issues. Yet their responses were always something like, "That's how sons' wives are." And I continued to struggle without finding a solution. Even when advised to keep my distance, it was always Daisy who initiated contact. Whether I listened to her calmly or subtly rejected her, I found myself at a loss dealing with an unsatisfied Daisy. During this time, I was informed by Daisy about celebrating Mila's 10th birthday at a famous Chinese restaurant. Despite sending gifts for every celebration, including birthdays, I had never received a word of thanks from my eldest son's family. Instead, I was met with remarks like, "Jessica, you have no taste. It's better if you just give us cash." Naturally, I had never been invited to any of their celebration gatherings. After being told not to interfere with family events, I had refrained from getting involved. Mila's birthday celebration is at her favorite Chinese restaurant. You're coming too, right, Jessica? May I ask why you're inviting me this time? You're Mila's grandmother. It's not strange for you to come, right? Despite the usual attitude from Daisy, her words made me suspect something unpleasant. Still, if I didn't go, I would surely be blamed for not attending my granddaughter's birthday. After much thought, I decided to attend the celebration. Although I had a bad feeling, part of me hoped that maybe they were trying to mend our relationship. If my suspicions turned out to be true, I would stop involving myself with them. With that thought, I went to the Chinese restaurant on the appointed day. But as expected, my faint hope was immediately betrayed. Daisy and her family, waiting for me, looked at me and sneered with malice. "Look, there's shark fin soup, Mila's favorite. Since Grandma is paying today, let's eat a lot." Yay! When I expressed my surprise, Daisy burst out laughing as if she was greatly enjoying herself. Initially, I had thought that it wouldn't be a problem to pay for the meal considering it was to celebrate Mila's 10th birthday. However, Daisy's declaration, as if it was a given even before I offered, took me by surprise. You're not planning to eat without paying, are you, Jessica? How brazen. I never had such intention, but you could have at least mentioned the cost beforehand. What? I told you in advance. Don't blame others for your forgetfulness. It's true what they say about memory loss in old age. The usual exchange of sarcasm made me realize that what I had hoped for was never going to happen. I decided to eat quickly and leave. As I was about to enjoy the delicious-looking dishes laid out before me, something happened. Hey, what do you think you're doing? What do you mean? I'm just trying to eat. As I reached for one of the expensive-looking dishes, Daisy slapped my hand away. Her gesture, like scolding a child for a mistake, made me sweat, wondering if I had done something rude. But seeing me flustered, Daisy laughed mockingly and said something outrageous. Today, Jessica, you're just the wallet. So no eating. What, Jessica? Did you really think you were invited for Mila's celebration? It's obvious you're here to pay the bill. That's right, pay up. Be grateful we even let you sit at the table. Don't even think about touching the food. It's a joke. Daisy and Arya took turns insulting me. Seeing this, Arthur turned his face away from me and said nothing. In a situation with no allies, I felt as if my heart was being squeezed. I sighed, unable to find a solution to the relentless harassment. Feeling sick, I even started to think about just going home. Then, as if struck by an idea, Daisy dropped a single dumpling onto my empty plate. Well, can't be helped. I guess you can eat that much. Haha, Mom, a single dumpling. Jessica, that's all for you. You owe $700 for that dumpling, Grandma. That's so lame. Even Arya, a grade schooler, joined in laughing at me. Their demonic smiles, mother and daughter alike mocking me, extinguished any affection I had left for my granddaughter. This was the moment I decided to cut ties completely. I didn't feel like celebrating her birthday anymore. But as a severance, it was a small price to pay. I've had enough. I'll pay the bill and leave first. What, you're leaving already? Thanks for the meal. Please just leave me alone from now on. I was disappointed in Arthur, who wouldn't even make eye contact until the end. No matter what was said, Arthur wouldn't reprimand Daisy or even Mila. Trying to contain my intense anger, I went to pay the bill. As I approached the cash register, the flustered owner appeared. Dear customer, I'm sorry, but the course meal is still ongoing. Could you please wait a little longer? I'm sorry, but I need to leave now. Can I just pay the bill first? Didn't you like the food? No, the dumpling was delicious. Just the dumpling? Was there something in the other dishes you didn't like? Apparently, Daisy had reserved a course meal, and the owner was puzzled why I was leaving halfway through. So he approached me, wondering how to explain the situation. Feeling foolish to cover for my eldest son's family, I blurted out, I'm apparently just the wallet. Then someone tapped my shoulder from behind. It was Mila, a friend who had listened to my complaints before. I saw everything just now. It's much worse than what you told me. Mila, when did you get here? Just before you all arrived. I heard the whole thing as it happened. Mila was at the same restaurant with her colleagues from work. She happened to see the way my eldest son's family was treating me and hurried to talk to me as I was heading to the register. Seemingly more outraged than me at my son's family's behavior, Mila said, "You don't need to pay," and stopped my hand. Listen, Jessica, even if it's your grandchild, that behavior is not normal at her age. She should know better than to treat family that way. But no matter what I say, nobody listens to me, not even my son Arthur. So you're just going to let them walk all over you. Mila's words made me realize something. Looking back, my eldest son's family, unconcerned about me, was happily chatting and enjoying their meal. They probably don't even consider me as family anymore. Arthur glanced at me for a moment, but quickly averted his eyes as soon as we made eye contact. Seeing such a pitiful attitude, I felt like the person sitting there was not my son. If they don't understand words, then show them with actions. I'll help you. Thank you, Mila. Can I ask for a little help? Encouraged by Mila, I felt like I had finally found an ally. The owner, sensing the uneasy situation, nodded at me as if to say he was on my side. I'm sorry, but I only ate one dumpling. Understood. Let's do this. Based on our explanation and the owner's decision, I only had to pay for the one dumpling I ate. It felt awkward to put out just a few bills, but the owner smiled, processed the payment, and handed me the receipt. The rest of the bill will be paid by those who ate. No worries. Thank you very much. In a situation with no allies, I found unexpected salvation in the kind restaurant owner and my friend. Internally, I felt that this alone was a good enough punishment for them. But after receiving advice from Mila, I wasn't planning to let their divine retribution end there. I'm sorry and thank you so much for today. It's all right. From now on, if they treat you badly, speak up firmly, okay? Yes, thank you. Actually, I have another favor to ask if that's okay. I thanked Mila and made a request before watching her return to the restaurant. Then I headed home, ready to deliver a final blow to my eldest son's family the next day. When my doorbell rang, I was sure it was Daisy. I had anticipated that she would come to complain about the payment from yesterday. Sure enough, the monitor showed Daisy glaring at the camera with a furious expression, and I went to the door. What do you mean, Jessica? Not paying for yesterday's food and drinks? What kind of reasoning is that? Food and drinks? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. It's about Mila's birthday party yesterday. That's right. You should at least pay up. Arya, who came with Daisy, was also glaring at me. As the restaurant owner had said, my son's family had to pay for themselves and were in a panic. They hadn't brought their wallets, expecting me to pay. Arthur had to run to an ATM at a grocery store. They were quite embarrassed. Arya, showing her anger, furrowed her brow and yelled at me. Her expression was hardly one you direct at a family member. I sighed lightly before facing Daisy to talk. I only ate one dumpling yesterday, so I only paid for what I ate. The dumpling cost $700, remember? Oh, maybe you didn't hear it because of your age. With such rude attitudes from a wife and granddaughter, I didn't feel like paying anymore. As I retorted, they became even more heated and started verbally abusing me. What kind of attitude is that? Just because you're Mila's grandmother, do you think you can do anything you want? I don't want a grandma like you. Daisy pointed fingers at me as if I were some kind of villain. Arya, too, acted as though she was a hero delivering justice to evil. Was there really a reason I had to be yelled at like this? I couldn't help but ask out loud. An astonishing response came back. Hey, why do I have to be treated like this? What don't you like about me? What have I done? You haven't done anything. You know, wives just don't like their mother-in-laws. What do you mean? Just that this time I thought I'd make you useful as a wallet. Stunned by Daisy's unexpected words, I was speechless. Then, before I could signal, the door to the next room opened. Mila entered the living room. The moment they saw Mila's face, the two were speechless, their mouths agape. Listening to you all this time, is that how you treat my friend? What, miss, why are you here? Mila was the most flustered by Mila's sudden appearance. That's understandable. Mila still works as a language teacher in a certain classroom and is also the teacher of the language class that Mila attends. When I had spoken to Mila, the situation was so different from Mila's behavior in class that she had trouble believing me. But after yesterday's incident, Mila had become my ally and came to my house today. When Arya said she wished I was her real grandmother, I was so happy. Don't be deceived, Mississippi. This woman made my mom cry before. My friend wouldn't do that. Besides, you just said mom wasn't mistreated, right? What? But mom, grandma was mean to you, right? Mila seemed to have believed everything Daisy told her about me without hearing the details. Lee, apparently not expecting to be overheard, looked panicked. She became visibly nervous, glancing at Arya with a troubled expression. Seeing her mother's behavior, Mila's face rapidly paled. I was speechless at Daisy's inability to come up with a better excuse for her actions. Miss, please listen to our side too. Just because she's your friend, it doesn't mean you should take Jessica's side. But I am listening. You just said she wasn't mistreated, didn't you? Well, I couldn't just stay silent when accused like that. Daisy, always quick with words, tried to make excuses and win Mila over. But Mila was judging based on the behavior she had witnessed, not on Daisy's unsubstantiated claims. With no chance of Mila siding with them, Arya, scolded by her teacher, looked like she was about to cry. Only giving one dumpling and then expecting $700 in payment? That's no way to treat family, is it? But it was my birthday, so it's only natural for Grandma to pay. That's what Mom said. Considering your attitude earlier, those kinds of words wouldn't come out unless you really look down on someone. You usually speak to your grandmother like that, don't you? Apparently, Arya was very fond of Mila and had never shown the same behavior towards me. Shocked by her favorite teacher's words, Arya seemed deeply affected. Daisy, while still glaring at me, was at a loss for words. Complaining to the teacher? How sneaky of you. It wasn't a complaint. I just happened to see what was going on. Well, I won't forgive you, Jessica. Don't think you can see your granddaughter again. Fine by me. I'd like to ask the same. Don't involve me anymore. When I retorted, Daisy left, pulling Mila's hand and looking resentful. As I watched them leave, I finally let out a sigh of relief. Seeing this, Mila patted my back. After all that, they won't be able to act so arrogantly anymore. Thank you, Mila. Sorry for always relying on you. It's fine, Jessica. They wouldn't listen to you, right? With that attitude, it's no wonder. Mila's cheerful demeanor saved me, and I was able to cut ties with Daisy and her family. It's a shame I couldn't say anything to Arthur, but I don't expect to hear anything more from Daisy. Seeing the usually confident Daisy taken aback cleared the frustration I had been carrying. Afterward, apparently Daisy and Arya got into an argument because Daisy had lied to Arya about me, leading to Mom making the teacher dislike me. Mila still couldn't be appeased, and Daisy called me to complain. Explain the situation to Mila. Is it okay for Arya to stop going to her language class? What's there to explain? Mila saw everything for herself. What more is there to say? If you admit to harassing me, then my story won't be a lie. Why? You could at least agree with me on that. No way. That's your responsibility. You should sincerely apologize to Arya. Daisy called me several times, but since she told me to stay away, I stopped answering. Arthur also called, confused about which side to take between Daisy and Arya. Disgusted with his indecisive attitude, I echoed the words once said to me, handle your own problems. Arya continues to attend Mila's class and has become much quieter since being scolded that day. Well, she was too energetic before, so maybe this is just right for her now. As a sign of reflection, I hope so. Don't worry about it, Jessica. As a teacher, I'll keep an eye on her. Thank you. I owe you so much, Mila. Don't mention it. We're friends after all, Mila said this nonchalantly. Please don't worry about it. I couldn't help but feel grateful to Mila. Next time, I plan to go out with Mila and finally enjoy the Chinese meal we missed.
Hey there, I'm Jessica, and I'd like to share with you the complexities of my relationship with my mother-in-law. Ruby, she always seemed to make things hard for me. Ruby had old-fashioned ideas and never really liked me. For a while, my husband Michael and I lived far from them, so Ruby couldn't bother us much. But when Michael got a job close to them, we had to deal with her more. I could handle Ruby's behavior because I grew up dealing with difficult people like my own parents. Luckily, Michael's dad, Jasper, was always nice to me. But the tough part was that Ruby spent time with my daughter, Erin, who was 9 at the time. Erin loved her grandparents, and they were the only ones she knew well since I didn't have contact with my own parents. Even though Ruby and I had our issues, I put them aside for Erin's sake. I wanted Erin to have a good relationship with her grandparents. Michael also cared about family a lot, so I couldn't just cut Ruby out of our lives. Erin enjoyed spending time with her grandparents, but Ruby still caused problems sometimes. Ruby kept criticizing Erin's diet, saying I wasn't feeding her right. She thought Erin needed more nuts for protein, but Erin was allergic to nuts, and even their smell made her sick. I told Ruby this many times, but she wouldn't listen. She said Erin needed to eat nuts to get over her allergy and called me a bad mom. I knew you'd say this, Ruby. We talked to the doctor, and Erin's meals are balanced. Skipping nuts won't hurt anyone, but it could make Erin really sick, I told her. Even after explaining and listening to the doctor, Ruby didn't change her mind. She thought exposing Erin to nuts would help her allergies. I was tired of arguing with her and tired of being called a bad mom. Ruby even tried to get Erin to eat nuts, but Erin knew better and always said no. Feeling more and more worried about what Ruby might do, I decided to talk to Michael about it. I'm really concerned about leaving Erin alone with Ruby. I'm afraid she might give Erin food she's allergic to, thinking it will help her allergies, I told him. Don't worry so much, Jessica. My mom might have old-fashioned ideas, but she knows her boundaries, and Dad is always there to step in if things get out of hand. Erin loves being with her grandparents, and we can't just stop her from seeing them, Michael said, trying to reassure me. But Ruby keeps ignoring Erin's allergies. I'm genuinely scared for Erin's safety whenever she's with them without me. We need to talk about this. I can't keep worrying like this, I insisted. Relax, Jessica. There's no need to stop Erin from seeing my parents just because of this small issue. Erin loves being with them, you know. And if you're worried about Mom, I'll talk to her. She'll listen to me, Michael assured me. His words made sense. Erin really enjoyed being with her grandparents, so I couldn't bring myself to stop her if she had ever said she didn't want to see them. I would have respected her decision, but I didn't realize that even Michael couldn't change Ruby's behavior. Things came to a head at Erin's 11th birthday party. Jasper and Ruby were invited, and they said they'd come. Ruby seemed really excited, which made me uneasy, though I didn't know why. When they arrived early, it surprised me because Ruby usually avoided being around me. She gave Erin a big present wrapped in birthday paper and said, "Happy birthday, Erin. Here's your gift. Grandma got you something really special." Erin thanked Ruby, and then Ruby said, "Wow, that's a big gift. What's inside, Grandpa?" "I have no idea, Erin. Grandma chose it, and she won't even tell me what's in there." "We'll both find out when you open it," Jasper said. "Come on, open Grandma's gift and see what she got you. I bet you'll love it, sweetie." "I'll be your favorite grandma ever," Ruby said excitedly. "I can't wait to see what you got me, Grandma. I'm so excited." "We'll open all the gifts after we cut the cake," Erin suggested. "No, Erin needs to open my gift before cutting the cake. That's why I came early, to give her my special present," Ruby insisted. Despite feeling suspicious about Ruby's behavior, Erin seemed genuinely happy to get such a nice gift from her grandma. The big, heavy package made Erin even more excited, and she couldn't wait to see what was inside. She wanted to start opening her presents once all her friends were there. I agreed to let Erin open Ruby's gift before the cake, as Ruby said it had to be done that way. I didn't want to upset Erin on her birthday, so we went along with it. But little did I know what a disaster it would turn into. Luma and her parents were let down by the one person they trusted. Ruby not only ruined Erin's birthday but also turned everyone against her. When Erin opened the gift, she found a big cake with her name on it. She was happy for a moment, but then she passed out. Michael and I rushed to her, scared and confused, when we saw her throat swelling up in shock. I watched as Michael hurried to get an epinephrine shot while someone else called the police. Knowing exactly who was behind this, I confronted Ruby, demanding answers. "What on earth did you put in Erin's cake? What's in it?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and fear. Ruby pretended she didn't know anything, saying, "I didn't do anything, Jessica. It's just a regular cake. I have no idea what's happening. Maybe something you did caused Erin to faint. You've been neglecting her nutrition despite my warnings, and now she's paying the price. Don't try to blame me. Erin was fine just a moment ago, and now she's having an allergic reaction. Tell me what you did to her, Ruby. I hope you didn't mess with the cake. You need to own up to your actions and take responsibility." Look at Erin, she's turning blue, I snapped back, ignoring Ruby's excuses, focusing solely on Erin. I hurried over with the epinephrine I always kept on hand for emergencies. Although Erin's swelling went down a bit, she remained unconscious. It was clear that she needed to go to the hospital to fully recover. The room was filled with worry for Erin, tears welled up in my eyes, and even Michael looked close to crying. Ruby, who was already in tears, seemed scared. In that moment, I decided to cut open the cake to see what was inside. What I found shocked me to the core. I demanded answers from Ruby, questioning her sanity for putting nuts in the cake. Ruby, what were you thinking? You ignored my warnings and put nuts in the cake, putting Erin's health at risk. How could you be so careless? I only wanted to help Erin, not hurt her. I didn't like that Jessica was so strict about Erin's diet. While it's true Erin might have reactions sometimes, I thought gradually giving her nuts could help, Ruby argued. My frustration boiled over when I confronted Jessica, saying, "Are you crazy? Our daughter is allergic to nuts. She could have died from this reaction. Who gave you the right to decide how to handle her allergies? Look at the mess you've made. I'm Erin's grandma, and I have the right to take care of her. She'll be fine. You're all overreacting. You're just trying to scare me for no reason. I'm sure this is all part of Mila's plan to make me look bad. But listen, Ruby, if things go my way today, you'll be in big trouble. Right now, all I care about is Erin's health," I said firmly. Just then, the ambulance arrived with paramedics. They took care of Erin and took her to the hospital with us following closely. The doctors told us Erin would need time to wake up and would have to stay at the hospital for a day or two. We were all overwhelmed with emotion. I broke down in the hospital, finding comfort in Michael's arms. After calming down, I called Jasper to let everyone know that Erin was no longer in danger. When I hung up, I turned to Michael and expressed my anger, saying, "I'll never forgive Ruby for what she did today. She could have put our daughter's life at risk. I've been thinking about how serious this is. It's unbelievable, something I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it myself. My mom has become someone I don't even recognize anymore. She did all of this just to make me look like a bad mom. She acted like she cared about Erin's happiness, but she never thought about how dangerous it was for Erin. Even after everything, she still says I planned it all. Today showed me how far my mom will go to make you look bad. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner and didn't do more to keep her away from us. I need to protect Erin from my mom's bad influence. I failed as a husband and as a father." Michael was starting to realize how serious the situation was, and Jasper, who had always been a good grandfather, was clearly affected by Ruby's actions. This time, she went too far. Even though she'd gotten away with things before, we weren't going to let her off easy this time. We decided then and there that we couldn't let Ruby keep hurting Erin. Her actions were a threat to Erin's safety, and we couldn't allow her to keep causing trouble in our lives. Ruby was no longer welcome in our family. We were determined to protect Erin and make sure she grew up in a safe and loving environment. It wouldn't be easy, but for Erin's sake, it was a decision we were ready to stand by. Following a heartfelt discussion, my husband and I quickly made a decision while Erin was still in the hospital. It was time to head back home. Jasper, Ruby, and a few guests stayed behind, eager for updates on Erin's condition. This gave us the perfect opportunity to address Ruby's actions. When we got home, 4 hours had passed since the incident. In the living room, we found Jasper scolding Ruby while she seemed indifferent, busy on her phone. The untouched birthday cake sat sadly beside them, a painful reminder of what had happened. Despite my sadness, I held back my emotions. When they noticed us, Jasper and Sophia hurried over. "I just got an update," I said. "Erin is in good hands, and she'll recover soon. Although she's still unconscious, the doctors are hopeful. Thank goodness, Erin will be okay. I was so worried, but it looks like everything's fine. It wasn't even a big deal. Erin will be fine, and her nut allergy will go away soon, Ruby declared. In that moment, Michael unleashed his anger on Ruby, scolding her for everything she had done. Jasper joined in, expressing his disappointment, and the guests, visibly shocked, stared at Ruby with disapproval. I too was filled with rage. I've had it with you, Ruby, I declared. We've given you so many chances to change. Even after your actions put my daughter in the hospital, you show no remorse. This is it. You will never be allowed near Erin or our family again. You're banned from this house. You can't tell me where to go. Your son won't cut me off for no reason. I won't let you keep me from my granddaughter just because we don't agree on how to raise her, Ruby shot back. No, Mom, Michael replied firmly. You're not welcome near me or my family ever again. Dad can come here anytime, but not you. He's the only sensible grandparent Erin has. He's done his best to keep Erin safe. But today, you put Erin in the hospital and acted like it was the right thing to do. I can't let someone so heartless be around my daughter. Ruby couldn't believe her own son was turning against her. She could always trust Michael to support her, not realizing he was being rational, unlike her. Even the guests started criticizing her. Ruby felt trapped with no one on her side, not even Jasper. In desperation, she screamed at us, blaming me for setting her up. This is all your fault, Jessica. You turned everyone against me. I'll never forgive you for this. You should be begging for our forgiveness. Your actions have ruined your reputation and kept you from Erin. I'll sue you for grandparents' rights. I'll take you to court, and the judge will let me see Erin. Just wait and see. I don't need anyone to support me, I responded firmly. You're not going to have much luck getting grandparents' rights from jail. I'm sure the judge would find it pretty funny to have a criminal asking for visitation after putting her own granddaughter in danger. What are you talking about, Jessica? Why would I go to jail? I didn't do anything wrong. Ruby protested. Didn't do anything. I shot back. What you did is a crime, Ruby. You can be arrested for knowingly exposing a child to allergens. It's considered a form of poisoning. Maybe you didn't realize it, but Michael and I did. We've already called the police on you, and look, here they come now to arrest you. Ruby, in denial, insisted, no, you're lying. This can't be happening. You can't arrest me for this. Ruby's panicked expression showed her desperation as she begged us not to send her to jail. Tears flowed down her face, and she started to panic. Just then, 2 officers came in and told her she was under arrest. She clung to her hands, begging us not to send her to jail. Michael remained unmoved, telling the cops to take her away, while I gave Ruby a cold look, showing that her deceitful game was over. In a last attempt, she turned to Jasper for help, begging him to do something. Jasper, please. You can't let your wife get arrested like this, she pleaded. But Jasper stood firm, saying, when my wife does something truly terrible and shows no remorse, I won't protect her. I've warned you for years to change, and you never listened. Today, you put our granddaughter in danger. I was only trying to protect her, not realizing it would hurt her so badly. Please, Jasper. I'm your wife. You have to help me, Ruby pleaded desperately. But Michael stood by his decision, saying firmly, Ruby, I've already cut you out of my life. It's the right thing to do, and I plan to do the same tomorrow. I'll talk to a divorce lawyer. I want to end this as soon as possible. I won't stay with someone like you. I'll protect my granddaughter and my kids from you. Ruby was shocked and pleaded desperately, "No, no, no, Jasper, you can't do this to me. I'm your wife." Ignoring her, Jasper told the cops to take her away. Ruby continued crying and begging for help, bringing a tumultuous end to an event that had long concluded. A sense of peace washed over me as Michael, Jasper, and I went back to the hospital after the other guests left, clearly upset by Ruby's actions. They promised to tell everyone what she had done. The next day, Erin woke up feeling much better, but she was terrified of Ruby. Erin cried and begged us to keep her away from her grandmother, saying how Ruby had tried to make her eat things she was allergic to. To help Erin deal with her feelings, we got her a therapist. At the same time, Michael and I started going to therapy together to work on our communication as a family. Having Jasper's support was really important for all of us. With his help, we started to heal and grow stronger as a family. Ruby's life took a sharp turn for the worse after the incident. Her actions caught up with her, and she faced serious consequences. Once her own family found out what she had done, they scolded her and cut ties with her. Even her friends were disgusted by her behavior and stopped talking to her. With no one to turn to, Ruby found herself in a desperate situation, begging everyone for bail money. But she didn't get any help, and Jasper filed for divorce the next day. Ruby was served with divorce papers while still in jail. Receiving the divorce papers herself sent Ruby into a fit of rage. In the following months, Jasper was able to get a quick divorce, taking advantage of state laws with the police report as evidence. Our legal case against Ruby moved forward. Despite the expectation for Ruby to cover Erin's medical expenses, her financial struggles resulted in a lengthy prison sentence as the judge ruled against her. Moreover, we obtained restraining orders to ensure she stays away from our family. With confidence that Ruby won't have the chance to approach us again, we remain watchful. But if by some chance she tries to cross the line, she'll encounter the fierce protection of Mama and Papa Bear, who are determined to do whatever it takes to keep Erin safe.